Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy. We have reached the 13th entry in our James Bond Retrospective with 1983's Octopussy, directed once again by John Glenn. Last week was a little bit of a point of contention, not between me and George, but me, George, and the people watching. So obviously last time we did For Your Eyes Only, which we were, I don't know, like average to, I'd say, more negative on, and the people spoke, and they loved that movie. There was an outcry, there was a demand for really 007 to return to restore balance to the conversation and offer a different perspective. So by popular demand, we've got him back. So we've got Tom, who was obviously rejoining us from the Moonraker review. And for the first time in this retrospective and on the channel, we're introduced to Matt. So thank you very much for both jumping on.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. No worries. What I want to add as a disclosure for Your Eyes Only, this isn't a part 2, and I'm safe to say we all enjoy Octopussy, so we don't have to worry about that as an initial question. So don't shut this one down in anger, that we won't be fighting each other. What I'm going to quickly do before we head into the opening of the film news, I'm going to go over the social. So, we're on the penultimate Roger Moore film now, so it's only wise to carry on commenting your love for the man himself and his performance in this. Is he heading back to Moonraker, or is it the verge of A View to a Kill? I want to know all your Roger Moore thoughts, because this isn't a really fun one. I think I've always seen this as a sign of what's to come, but we'll get into that. So comment your thoughts on Octopussy, everything about the film. Doesn't matter what it is, we'll reply to those comments. We love discussing these films on these, so do hit that. And if you want to see more from us, if you're new to it, if you don't know, we've been doing the other James Bond films, as Chris said, we're on episode 13, so head back onto the channel, look at some of the earlier ones. But I'm going to say that the Moore era has been a lot funner to do, I think, discussion-wise, than the Connery ones. I'm just going to leave that there. And our socials are down below as our Facebook, Cinema Savvy, Twitter at Cinema_Savvy, and we have a link to our letterbox. But what we want to bring up, Matt, with this being your first time on the podcast, well, not on the podcast, on Cinema Savvy, I keep forgetting used to be a podcast, we have a little ranking system in place at the moment. We're getting everyone's favourite Bond ranking. So if you're watching at home, you'll see it on the screen now. Roger Moore is currently on the lead with 3. And then we've got Connery and Brosnan on 2. Dalton on 1, and unfortunately Lazenby and Craig haven't made the board yet, or will they make it at all? We don't know. But who would you pick as not necessarily the best, as your favourite Bond actor, and why?
Blimey, it's a really difficult question. To be fair, I think they've all got their big positives. I'd have to go. It would have to be between 3. It would have to be between Sean, Roger, and Tim. I think Roger's the one where the most consistent. Across 7 films, if Sunday afternoon, if you want to put one on, I'd put any of his on and just absolutely love every minute. Sean Connery is possibly the best all rounder, I think, maybe, and I love all his films as well. Timothy Dalton only did 2, but 2 out of 2, I think, are absolutely brilliant. So, on that basis, I'll say Timothy Dalton.
Oh man,
Yes.
This is getting close. I love it.
This is tense. Run it.
It's like, I don't know. It's like 99.8% against 99.7%. Do you know what I mean? They're so high in my estimations that it's difficult to say. But I'll go for Tim.
No, that's perfect. That's Dalton up in the rankings. So we're going to have Roger Moore still in the lead, with the 3 of us following closely behind. And I'm going to quickly diverse onto Chris, because we've kind of had an unofficial rule. This is the first film that Chris has yet to see. This was his first film to see. And for this ranking series as well, we're going to let Chris, if he needs to, because at the moment it's logged under Connery, but when all this is done and dusted, I think Chris may have the deciding vote, because we're going to let him re-pick his favourite, just because he would have seen everyone for that very first time. So it's looking very, very interesting at the moment. I'm excited to see what's next.
Yeah, because it's mad that there's still 2 Bonds that I haven't seen and know pretty much nothing about. So, I'm really looking forward to getting onto those. We've got one more Roger Moore one next week, though, and that one is probably the one I'm most looking forward to. But, first time viewing for me on this one, and sort of like going into this one just based on reviews and things that I'd heard. Like, everyone was saying this one was really bad, and should I feel bad that I kind of love this one? I don't know where I'd rank it just yet. I need to watch all of them before I make that decision, but I had an absolute amazing time with this film. I loved it almost beginning to end. There are some silly moments in there, but name me a Bond film that doesn't have that. Well, last week's didn't really have many silly moments. There's one, But yeah, I just, it was so entertaining. And, you know, everyone kept saying, like, oh, Roger Moore's too old in this one and everything. I didn't even have that problem with this one. He just looked like he was having an absolute whale of a time. The plot makes no sense, but I don't mind that. And it's just great. So, am I meant to hate this one? You guys help me out here, because you've seen like this movie plenty of times. This was my first time watching it, but I kind of loved it. I'm not going to lie.
I think it's okay to love it. I'm going to hand down to you guys below who would have seen it a lot more than me, though.
We had it as our first one, didn't we? Our first ever review on
we did.
our podcast, Really 007. And I chose that because it's a film that's got everything. I thought there's so much to talk about. It's got deadly serious bits. It's got very silly bits, which we'll obviously talk about there. And it's just, I think it's probably the one growing up I watched the most. So I was so familiar with it and I just love it. So yeah, it's the one that we've probably, out of about the top 5 where you've seen the most and you've got the most history with growing up. So yeah, love it.
Yeah, so obviously Tom and I are brothers, for anyone who doesn't know that. Growing up in the same household. So yeah, Octopussy was on all the time. We watched it so much. I think it must be the one we watched the most. I absolutely love it. I think it's got a really good balance between, some serious stuff, some really genuinely tense moments, but some of the lighter-hearted moments. I think Moore's on great form again. There are really good characters within the film. Yeah, so we've seen it, I don't know. I dread to think how many times we've seen it, dozens and dozens of times. No idea what the plot's about. I mean, there are occasional viewings recently where I've been, maybe that's it. But I mean, I have no idea really, in truth. But at the crucial points, you know what needs to happen or what Bond needs to stop or not do or do. So I absolutely adore it. And thankfully, judging off Twitter and things, it does have a lot of big fans of it, which is great.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who was having a hard time following the plot, because I always feel really stupid when I watch these James Bond films if I don't completely understand it. I'm like, am I kind of tuning in and out a little bit and missing bits? But I'm glad I'm not the only one with this one. And I guess, people who watch these retrospectives tend to have watched Octopussy many, many times and know the James Bond franchise. But the plot, if you can even call it that for this film, Bond is assigned the task of following the megalomaniacal Soviet general who is stealing jewelry and art objects from the Kremlin art repository. This leads James Bond to a wealthy exiled Afghan prince, Kamal Khan, and his associate Octopussy, and the discovery of a plot to force disarmament in Western Europe with the use of nuclear weapons. I guess that's kind of the plot, but I think what's interesting about this film...
Thank you. Yeah.
What's interesting about this film is it's kind of like Eon asserting their dominance, really, because this came out 4 months before Never Say Never Again, which was the competing James Bond film at the time, which I still haven't seen, and we've been debating after we've done all of the Eon films, and because we love doing these James Bond videos, and we'd quite like to go into, like the other Casino Royale film from the 60s and Never Say Never Again, but it's just interesting to read about how a lot of their decisions about this film, especially Roger Moore returning for this film, which we can talk about in a minute with some of the people they were even screen testing. It got as far as a screen test. He came back for this one. They pulled him back in order to compete with Connery returning for Never Say Never Again. So it's quite an interesting production history to this film, I think.
Yeah, it's one of them where we were chatting before, obviously that happened in the 80s. If that happened today, that would be a humongous ordeal. And we were talking between us saying, is there anything like that could or has happened that's not Bond, right? And me and Chris were saying that, if there was suddenly a Tobey Maguire Spider-Man film coming out at the same time as a Tom Holland Spider-Man film, you'd be like, what on earth is going on? And there's no situation like it before. And I think certainly back then in the I know you still get franchises back then, but obviously today's day and age of 10 picture contracts, Marvel, DC, 20 film franchises, it could happen, but you've still not had it. And it's amazing to think about Never Say Never Again. The whole, we bring up Kevin McClory each week now. Maybe that was his goal, was to be brought up in like weekly discussions for the next 50 years. But it's just one of them where it's fascinating just reading about how it was almost like you probably had the best script, actually. You mentioned this, like the authority they have with it, because this has, this is the official Bond films where we're doing the official Eon ones in the retrospective at the moment. And it's just, you've got to think tactically that Connery coming back again in the 80s is such a before the film comes out as well. Obviously I wasn't around back then. I don't know what the trailers were like. Would the trailers have played with this film? I don't know. But, before the film's out, you probably also don't know if that's going to be good or bad or whatever it's going to be. And there must have been this humongous intrigue. And at the same time, you've got to look at Eon and think, when they were talking about getting rid of Moore, Dalton was first mentioned as well. At this point, I think they mentioned he was too young. Also, the same thing to Henry Cavill. Fingers crossed for down the line still. And I can't remember if Brosnan was first mentioned around this or View to a Kill, but it was before he did. What's the TV series? That's remembering on now. Remington Steele. I think he was being linked before that, and after Remington Steele, it was dead cert. So for them to obviously have screen tests of other actors, but then bring back more, I think that's Eon playing it safe, saying we just can't risk. Financially, if they'd have lost the Never Say Never Again, that would look terrible for Bond, and I can't imagine that happening at the same time. So for them to keep Moore, I completely agree with it. I think it was the right thing to do, and I'm the same as you guys. I think Moore's okay in this film, age-wise. I think next film is when it gets a bit... you still get the karate chops and the things like that, but the way this film is structured and designed, story-wise, actresses he's working with, it feels a bit closer to his age, rather than here's an 18-year-old ice skater, which is something I still really struggle with. But, that's just sort of my thoughts on the Never Say Never Again stuff, that this film could have potentially destroyed the official Bond films, and it didn't. And I've got a mad respect for everyone involved in this and make sure that didn't happen.
Yeah, I think it is such a unique situation. I'm not sure it will ever happen again. I mean, there's often, things, I'm trying to think of parallels, like, at the same time as Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, there was the Robin Hood film that came out with Patrick Bergin and Uma Thurman.
I guess Batman, maybe. We've got like a Batman in the Flash coming out alongside Robert Pattinson's Batman.
So that's what I was going to say. Yeah, and there's a few, there's a Superman who appears in Supergirl, and then that's the same one that's in a new Lois and Clark series, but then, at the same time as Henry Cavill's. So there are things like that, but I don't know, when it's Bond, it's a film series, and like just to suddenly have another one, but the original guy playing it is, like you say, Tobey Maguire. That's not a bad analogy, but after such a long-running, film franchise. So I think Roger Moore was really the only thing they could do. It would have been an absolutely massive risk, as you say, George, to suddenly cast somebody new. And if the audience didn't take to them, then you're in real trouble. Because Sean wasn't going to do another one after Never Say Never Again. That was just like a one-off almost, as I see it. So yeah, it was a big deal that they managed to get Roger back, and like you say, I really like him in this, and we'll discuss why later.
It was the 13th production, wasn't it? So there was all rumours, unlucky 13, and you're right, this could be the make or break film. You can't really compare it. Maybe Rafa Benitez going back to Everton when say Liverpool had a worse manager than Jurgen Klopp. No, I don't know. You can't really compare it. But back then, in the context, the audience absolutely loved Roger Moore. So it wasn't as if, oh heck, Sean Connery, of course everyone loved him as well. That's it. No one's going to watch our film. I think as well the audience was sort of loyal, and I think one of the reasons Sean did it, other than money, was to annoy Saltzman and Broccoli. And I think that was one of the main reasons, because he, the amount of times you've seen him interviewed saying, oh, the Bonds have got silly, they've got too fantastical. And he was so happy not to be in that whole press junket with having to do all the interviews all the time. So to come back in it is very unusual. I think that no one really mentions why he did it. And the other weird thing is that he's actually like a year younger, I think, than Roger Moore. So even though he perhaps looks a bit older than Roger did at the time, I think Roger looks in better shape, doesn't he, at the time?
Yeah.
I always say that Sean, give him till the 90s and then he looks the absolute bomb. So he does come good in the end. But yeah, so for this, I think fans would be like, I don't know. They'd probably be like just happy that there's 2 Bond films out, and they'd stay loyal to the official ones because you've got like the certain things they couldn't use, as the gun barrel and the James Bond theme. And you've got you've got Moneypenny, Q, all those kind of things. You do get Rowan Atkinson in Never Say Never Again, just in case you do manage to watch it. So Yeah. But yeah, the irony of that, of course, all that is that why don't we have all those key ingredients in the current films?
That's a discussion for a few more weeks' time. I think we're going to leave that there, just stoking the fire, just stoking that fire. Love it. But yeah, I mean, as George, as you mentioned, like the whole, now you get an actor, and probably the next Bond that we get after Craig, and even Craig himself, it's like a picture deal, isn't it? It's like you're contracted to this amount of films. And usually they've always got someone lined up. So it's quite an interesting thing with this film, in that as an audience as well, you kind of in this area of, is he coming back? Is he not coming back? Who's the next Bond? And, you know, it must have been really intriguing at the time and really interesting to kind of speculate who it was going to be. And, you know, there's been names thrown out there. I know that Timothy Dalton was pitched even back then. I think even for Your Eyes Only, his name was thrown around. Brosnan, I think, around the time. And it says here, Michael Billington, Oliver Tobias, and James Brolin, Josh Brolin's dad. And there's a picture on Wikipedia that there might even be footage out there. Were actually being screen tested. So that's really interesting. Because Roger Moore was on the 3-picture deal. Tom Butler actually dropped a comment on our video for Your Eyes Only last week where he highlighted this, that his contract was fulfilled with The Spy Who Loved Me, and then after that it was done on like a film-by-film basis. And I think the studio did kind of go behind his back with For Your Eyes Only, where they were seeking another Bond because they were concerned about his age at the time, which is pretty grimy. Like, you think they'd have that conversation with Moore first before going behind his back. But I am glad that he came back for this one. I do think it was the right decision as well. And I just love Roger Moore. I was saying last week that I was feeling the Roger Moore fatigue, and as a viewer and going through these week to week, I am ready for that next incarnation now. But I don't know. This was like a second win for me with Roger Moore on this one. So I thought it was great. And then just another casting thing, which I think we need to mention, is Robert Brown being cast as M. So they got around it in the previous film by just writing him out and saying that he was on leave or something. But in this one, you do get a new actor playing him. I think it's only like one scene though, isn't it? So it's, and they don't hit you over the head with it either. They just kind of move on, which I think was probably the best thing they could do with it, I think.
Yeah, I think with them as well, it's always weirder to look at this with the newer lens that, you know, we know there's been so many M's over the years, so I don't know if anyone has like, we're not going to do a favorite M ranking, but you know, to me it was always like Judi Dench, right? Mm-hmm. And obviously it took me years to clock Casino was a reboot because she was still in it, and we'll get to that eventually down the line. But it gets to one of those things where at the time you didn't realize that having a new M was a massive ordeal. And you know, I think the way we are now, where Ralph Fiennes has turned up, it kind of made sense. Like, oh, Ralph Fiennes, like, yeah, that works. Whereas then it was the original M passed away in the role as well. And I do like the fact that Fiore's only, because I know we mentioned it towards the end because it just completely forgot to write in the schedule, in absolute truth, but it is a massive deal that we don't have Bernardine anymore. And I think when you look at the origins of the franchise, we've still got Moneypenny as well until View to a Kill. Obviously, we still have Q through to World's Not Enough, but it's kind of like a little family. I know that the Broccoli always treat the Bond films like a family experience, but when you have these core groups, when you have the same crews that do it every couple of years, same actors, and I will say that, but I do think the Craig films have got that better in the latter films, but certainly the early ones, it was like, where are they all? And then it all came together in Skyfall. But it's what you want from the Bond film, even if it's a scene. You know, when he goes into the room and you've got him setting the mission, you've got him flirting Moneypenny, he's going off to Q to get the gadgets. It just makes you feel at home, and it's kind of what you want from them. And I do glad it works. And I think, you know, it's Roger Moore. He thinks there's a new Moneypenny as well. I know we're a little bit into the film now, but just straight away, you know, he's just chatting up to someone new, and I love what they're able to do. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, Robert Brown gets a little bit forgotten. I mean, I think that's possibly testament to the fact that we've had so many magnificent actors as M, you know, all the way through. Him, like you say, George, him having to replace Bernard Lee is a pretty big deal. It's a hard act to follow. Perhaps it was even more difficult with him being sort of similar age, you know, a kind of similar take, an authoritative man who's older than Bond. But I think Robert Brown is really underrated. I think he gives very competent, decent performances in this and A View to a Kill. Then in The Living Daylights, and especially License to Kill, you know, with Timothy Dalton, I think he really comes into his own, and he gives a really good performance, and a kind of different performance than we've ever seen before from an M. I don't know whether you guys thought this or remembered this, but Robert Brown was Admiral Hargreaves in The Spy Who Loved Me. Can you remember? Do you remember that? You know,
I don't remember that, but
not the submarine in that lovely tube with the guy who played Hilary Brain on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Do you remember that bit? And they pull out anyway.
The Royal Navy outfits.
Yeah, they're all there. Anyway, so there is a bit of a thing where I think Bond fans think that perhaps this is Admiral Hargreaves, and he's progressed through the ranks and become M. I don't know whether that's particularly true or whatever, because they of course, as we'll discuss later, they didn't mind recasting people who they'd already had in the cast in previous films. But yeah, I think Robert Brown is really decent, really good as M, and perhaps is unfairly forgotten sometimes.
I think all four of the people who've been cast as M have been brilliant. They've all been perfect at the time they were cast. I know the only thing that irks is how come Judi Dench is still in, even though there's a reboot with Casino Royale, but she's still arguably one of the best things. Well, yeah, definitely one of the best things about the Daniel Craig films and the relationship between that. So I think all four of them are brilliant. Robert Brown is the least talked about one, perhaps because he's not, a famous name. Because when Judi Dench was cast, it was like, wow, oh, she doesn't. To be fair, until then she wasn't. She was like known as a stage actress, so it was like a big thing that she was doing films. And then obviously she went on to win Oscars and everything. But Ralph Fiennes is the same. it's quite a big name, so they have to use them quite a lot more than they did. So particularly the 80s ones, I mean, M and Moneypenny, you'll see the next Moneypenny. She's hardly in the films, and there's not that pressure to sort of, if they're not needed, then they're not used. If they don't fit the plot. Whereas now they sort of, because they've got this sort of, it is a bit like the Avengers. We've joked about this before, with all of them in Spectre. We need to use them all. They need to work together. But in this, Robert Brown's so good, and the sort of, you need that tension between Bond and M, where he's been a little bit naughty. He's just going a little bit too far for M's liking, but M still trusts him and still backs him when it's most important.
Yeah, and I think, the best Bond films are the ones that, they utilize M, Moneypenny, and sort of like the supporting cast in exactly that, as a supporting role, where they just send Bond out on the mission. They might crop up here and there throughout the film, but on a very, very small basis. And, we'll get to it when we talk about Spectre, but if you're going to take the scissors to that film, just get rid of all like the side quest that goes on with M and Moneypenny, because it's just not needed at all. And I wanted to mention like the whole recasting thing, not even recasting, but using people from previous Bond films. I don't think they've done that in the last couple of Bond films, but we know that they're no stranger to it in the Bond series, especially with Blofeld towards the beginning with Diamonds Are Forever. But I did actually wonder, Matthew mentioned it, there might be some kind of like fan theory where you try and like, even the Bond girl in this, like, is she the sister or is she the relation of the one from Man with the Golden Gun? Probably not, but it is fun to think about, I think. And just while we're on the subject of Moneypenny, I've got to say one of my favorite scenes in this film is with Penelope Smallbone right at the beginning. And, you can't hate Roger Moore. He is so charming. He is the more like romantic Bond out of all of them, I think. And just when he hands like the rose to Moneypenny, he just turns around, the rest of the bouquet goes to this new bit of stuff. Love it. That is Bond to me. And, it's all done in a charming way, though. Like, even Moneypenny can't stay mad at him. So I just wanted to throw that out there right now. I know we talk about favorite scenes later, but whatever. I think we should get into like the film itself now. So the pre-credit scene, incredible. Bloody hell. I love this thing. So, I always say that some of my favorite opening scenes are the ones where it's played as like a whole narrative, like a beginning, middle, and end, where everything ties into the story. And I guess this one does on like a very loose basis, but this is just kind of like a wacky caper with Roger Moore. And after For Your Eyes Only, which, as I mentioned, we were kind of lukewarm on, and maybe in retrospective, once we've done them all, I might go back to that one and view it as more of a standalone Roger Moore film, that's a bit more serious. But I love the Moonraker kind of stuff. I love the wacky over the top stuff. And from the opening scene, I was like, okay, we're back in safe hands with this one. When I see Roger Moore in this kind of entertaining role, that is his depiction of Bond. And that's what they kind of ran with. And I think that's what they need to stick to with Roger Moore. It's great that he can sort of like flex his acting chops, and we can see more of a serious take and know that he can be more of that ruthless Bond. Like last week when he kicks the car off the cliff, but as soon as he's driving that little mini plane and like the Bond theme kicks in, I'm like, this is what I signed up for. So right from the off, I was like, okay, we're in safe hands with this one. It was a nice kind of return to form for me with Roger Moore.
Yeah, the opening. I mean, I love the pre-credit sequences. And we kind of spoke actually about Black Widow. We're not obviously going to go into that film, but we kind of mentioned in that review that was very Bond. You had a whole set piece sequence and then an actual title sequence, which we haven't really had. And I think Bond for me. I know that obviously cinema back in the sort of 60s and whatnot was always that's how cinema was, but I love the fact that as the decades have gone by, as cinema's evolved, and you could not have that, you could have it at the end. Bond always stuck with it. And the pre-credit scene for this one, and I was thinking in the last couple of minutes that who's had the best pre-credit sequences? I think that's a completely different debate for another time. But Roger Moore's got on a hell of a streak with them. And that's the whole mini story within it, the stunts inside of them, what they're trying to do, and the Roger Mooreisms. This one we have the whole fake moustache stuff, the general, the karate chop as well, which I absolutely love. That you guys mentioned it in your original in the podcast episode, but you kind of mentioned how he's maybe he's not the great spy he was because he just karate chops someone in the middle of a room and every other soldier's just there waiting. But it's what you want from a Roger Moore, and at the end of the day, he gets the job done, doesn't he? It doesn't matter how many missiles, weapons, planes it takes, pod racing maneuvers, which I wanted to bring up as well. But he gets it done, and what a way to set the film off. And as well, this was one of those rare set pieces where the opening scene isn't tied into the plot down the line. Mm-hmm. And as much as I love the one that will resurface or plant the seed for something to come up later, I do love the ones that just work as their own little 5-minute clip. You could just watch it one day while you're eating your dinner and then just, you'd be silly not to put the rest of the film on, but you can if you really didn't want to. So it's one of them, and I absolutely love this one. And it's going back to the stunts where, Chris, we spoke a lot about the rear projection. I think this is the best it's looked. Yeah. When Roger Moore's in the cockpit of the plane, I don't know if it was the technology there like Dunkirk or something where they had a pilot and him behind him. I don't know the logistics of it, but it looks like he is there for the very first time. And I thought it was absolutely incredible. And what a way to kickstart the film.
Oh, yeah. I agree. I think this might be the final one where it doesn't link in any way really to the rest of the plot. And I don't think that will ever change. I don't think audiences now, if they were going to watch a new Bond film in the cinema, would really understand. Hang on, that had nothing to do. What was all that about? That was like a completely separate mission. Rob, who's one of our podcast contributors, Rob Parker, he says he likes to think of a pre-credit sequence like this, especially this one, as like the end of the previous mission that Bond's been doing before he gets stuck into another one. But yeah, you're right that it has like its own sort of big beginning, middle, and an end. This has so many beats of Roger's Bond. I really like when Bond does a disguise or something like that, because that's like a spy. We don't get an awful lot of that these days. And I just love little beats where he's walking past and one of the guards salutes him, and then Bond checks back and like tells it, touches his lapel to tell him to smarten up or something. It's so good for Roger's Bond. But then it's a really exciting, sequence and incredible effects and those things where, only Bond would think of, going back into the hangar thing with the heat-seeking missile after him and, turning on his side to dodge it through the doors. That's James Bond, that. And then massive explosion. And then, the way... Oh, so good. Sorry, I could cry at the moment. The way he goes spinning off into the air at the end and there's like a crowd applauding because there's some kind of air show or something going on. And then lands to go and, to that petrol station.
Oh,
fill her up, please. What more could you want? Yeah. There's a popular kind of internet video on that, which our friend Stephen Carty did. So I think it's an absolute winner of a pre-credit sequence.
Yeah, you're totally sold in This Is James Bond. If you could think of something that was Bond within 5 or 10 minutes, just watch this. And Roger Moore's as good as he's ever been, I think, in this scene particularly. One of the bits in this that you haven't mentioned is that only Roger could do is when he's sort of on the back of that Jeep, being being sort of patrolled by those two guards, and he uses, you know, the babe who's sort of riding along them just to sort of like. Maybe Sean. I think Sean could do it. Maybe Pierce could do it. But Roger's the king, isn't he? He's like, "Go on, lads, have a look. Go on," and then grabs the. I mean, and then the way he's then suddenly on, he's on the Jeep, and he's just like, it's just genius, isn't it? And then John Barry's back. Will obviously go.
Oh yeah.
And his cues for this. And getting the Bond theme in it. And I think they did want to do that. They wanted more and more of the Bond theme because they knew that Never Say Never Again couldn't have it. So
I say it plays in like full statement, like so much throughout this film, doesn't it? And it's like, yeah, we're back on the Bond hype with this one. But yeah, and I think Roger Moore, like one of his strengths as an actor is it's the facial expressions and it's the glances. Like I think it was The Spy Who Loved Me. We had to use it on one of the GIFs on the social media. It's where he like kind of does like the look to the helicopter, and he does it so much. And yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because we'd probably have breezed past that. But it is those like little, just like the facial expressions and stuff. He's just so charming in the role. And I was just looking as well. There's a quote here from the stunt pilot who did all of the plane stuff, J.W. Fornoff. He said that, and this is a quote from him: "Today, few directors would consider such a stunt. They just whip it up in a computer lab." And I completely agree with that. So it is nice to see them, you know, getting stuck in and doing as much of it practically as they can. And, you know, you stole one of my one-liners, the "fill it up, please." That's
sorry.
What more do you want going into the into the main theme song for the film? But yeah, absolutely tremendous. So, you know, we've talked about Moore a lot. But if we move on to him, like thoughts on him being in the film, they do some very silly stuff with him in this film. I'm going to talk about Tarzan later. That deserves its own section on its own. But it's kind of just reiterating what I've said, really. He's just so at home in this role. And, you know, when he does get the chance to be more comedic and be charming, like even now, like his penultimate film is still on absolutely top form. Going into this one, I thought, you know, had some reservations about his age in the previous one, and I started to see the threads of that more. But in this one, I didn't have any problems like that. And as we've kind of mentioned, I think with the Bond girl being a similar age to him, and having that sort of like history with the character, it sold it more to me, I think, and I didn't have a problem with that in this one. It does go very silly, with like, again, the clown stuff, the gorilla costume, so much in this film, but I don't think it's any sillier than Moonraker. And if you were on board with if you hated Moonraker because it went too ridiculous, then yeah, I can understand you not liking this film. But we all love Moonraker, and we love it for its over the top and ridiculousness. And I think this is probably equal to, or probably even less than, some of the stuff that Moonraker does. So I was absolutely fine with him. And I'm intrigued to see what he's like in his final one, In View to a Kill, because I think that's the one where people say that maybe he shouldn't have been Bond in that one. But I'll wait and see next week. But yeah, I thought he was tremendous in this again.
I absolutely love him in this film. And I think because I didn't enjoy last week, I came into this like, oh, Octopussy. And it's one of the, because this is the thing, because I love Moore, and I always struggle with the latter ones. And I'm going to be honest, sorry guys, it's mainly because of For Your Eyes Only. And then you think, oh, two more and it's Dalton. Now, that isn't a criticism of Roger Moore. That's me getting excited for Timothy Dalton coming out. But I was watching this again. I was just sat there like, he's great. Like, it's great. It's ridiculous. But Chris, as you said, the man's been to space. What's he not going to do? He's going to tell a tiger to sit, and it will sit. You know, this film feels primed, and this is where I kind of struggled last week. I know I'm in a minority of this, but last week's film felt tailored for another Bond. Whereas this week, it felt like, you know, this is arguably a more Roger Moore film than it would be a Bond film. But that's what you're kind of in for at this stage. You need it to accommodate that you've got on screen. And everything about him in this one, from the costumes through to the comedy moments, and it was just perfect for him, ridiculous. But that's what you want from it, right? It doesn't need to be sort of draped in reality of the logistics of, you know, this mission, being on a safari chase, all that kind of stuff. It just works for him in his favor. He's got one-liners. He's got action. He's got karate chops. He's got great sequences. And as usual, he's just putting the charm on for everyone. And you just can't watch it and dislike him. And the big thing with this is that it does make you think that, you know, although obviously, again, look, modern lens, we know his next film's the last one. it doesn't come across like that massively in this film, right? You don't look at this and say, "Oh no, he's got one more in him, then he's got to go." Whereas with Craig, you could always tell with Spectre that he was a completely different conversation, but you could tell he was tired, and he didn't ever hide that as well. I'll slit my wrist and be Bond again, and you get that. And we always went into No Time to Die knowing full well he's not going to be Bond after, but in this one, you can't look at this and say, yeah, Roger Moore's definitely got one more in him and he's going to finish. He feels like he could play it forever. And I guess, he always, as the years went by after, said as well, I'm still James Bond, as Brosnan does, as many of them do. Not Connery, definitely not probably Craig after, and a couple of others. But it's just one of them where I love him in this film. And, I love Dalton, and I would love to have had more Dalton films, but how glad am I that it wasn't Dalton in Octopussy as well. And this worked for him directly. I think this is once again tailored for the Roger Moore experience.
Yeah, wow. Just to cover off, if you don't mind me just mentioning a few bits in defence of For Your Eyes Only.
No, of course.
Yes, please.
Well, I think I think they'd had The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker, which were both similar plots where the villains wanted to basically end the world and start a new kind of human race or almost from scratch. So they wanted to come back down to earth a bit, set it in the kind of Cold War era. I know that both Bibi Dahl and Melina Havelock are a lot younger than Bond. Of course, the thing with Bibi is that he doesn't ever go there. She tries and tries, but he doesn't actually go there. And the Melina, I think that's a really interesting kind of Bond girl, who's sort of seeking revenge. She doesn't necessarily do what Bond tells her to do all the time, and she's right there at the end trying to help out where she can. And I don't think I personally don't think the age gap seems as big as it really is in real life. This is just, me talking. Particularly when, and I think Rob mentioned this recently, when they're in that scene where they're tied together, in the sharks. I don't know. For me, that doesn't feel like they're really, it's like so ridiculous that they might end up together, and in the end, they only end up together right at the end anyway. So, but I think for me, it did show Roger can do some serious acting. He claims he couldn't, but I think he can, and I think there are examples in this film, but. You get so much of his charm in Octopussy; it's ridiculous. I mean, what a magnificent scene in the auction. It's really funny, but it's pretty clever to make an auction for a Fabergé egg like a really funny, interesting, quite almost not exciting, maybe the wrong word, but intriguing scene, and he's on such good form. Having said what I said about Melina and Bibi Dahl, I think it helps that he has great chemistry with Maud Adams. Again, there was quite a significant age gap, but he doesn't feel it at all. It feels like they would genuinely get together, and possibly I think she's the one that Roger's Bond could have ended up with more than any of the others. Like settled down with or something. There are those funny bits in. I don't know. Are we going to talk about the clown and gorilla stuff now, or are we
sure, go for it.
Yeah, okay. So
rip the Band-Aid off. Let's do it.
The gorilla costume is pretty ridiculous. I can understand why people might have a problem with that. The Tarzan yell, it's absolutely sort of ridiculous. It's weird because it's like it's silliness for just a couple of seconds in the film, and then you back out of it, and they sit, to the tiger as you mentioned, and hiss off to the snake. The clown, however, I know it sounds silly, Bond dressing up as a clown, and the silly thing is that he's able to get so quickly dressed as the clown with the makeup, and I know that sounds silly. However, I really like it, and I'll tell you why. Because we've had sorry, I'm waffling on and on here.
No,
forgive me, edit me out but we had the pre-credit sequence, which has nothing to do with the plot, and then immediately after the title sequence, we had that magnificent bit with the somebody dressed up as a clown running through the 009. We don't know, what on earth's going on. He's in a clown costume, but it's quite a scary, tense scene. And then he's being chased by one guy, and then he bumps into someone else who looks exactly the same. Anyway, brilliant scene. But when Bond dresses up as a clown later, it's suddenly, oh yeah, of course, this happened early on. And I know it's silly that it's the same clown costume. Yeah, fair enough. But we get this really interesting juxtaposition of Bond dressed as a clown with a really tense scene where he's not diffusing, he's dismantling the bomb or whatever you want to call it, which is again a brilliant scene. And the fact that he's in the clown costume, I think, almost adds to it, because it's just this strange juxtaposition, So I think this is, I love all Roger's performance, but I think this might be the very best as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree. It showcases everything that he can do. So coming back to For Your Eyes Only, I know what you mean. If you've been watching them in order, you've just seen him, I don't know, find his real groove in Spy Love Me, and that continues, even gets better perhaps in Moonraker. And then For Your Eyes Only, there's not too many jokes. He's fairly serious in it, but he's brilliant at that. So I think with Octopussy, maybe John Glenn and the others were thinking, hang on, he can do all that. We can have a more grounded plot, but still have that odd bit of Roger that the audience love, and we don't need to take that out. So yeah, I mean, there's so many examples of it in this. So you've got the silly bits, which you mentioned in the pre-title sequence. You've got the auction, and then a lot of it he's perving on women throughout the whole film, isn't he? Pretty much. Now there is a lady. Yeah.
Yeah. Dear
and
me.
he's like, there's about 3 bits where he's like in the bushes looking at naked women. But anyway, yeah. Roger being Roger.
We wouldn't have it any other way, though.
No. But none of it seems, I don't know, it doesn't seem sort of dodgy. It's because it's him, and it's like, oh, while I'm here kind of thing. But who else could sell getting out of a crocodile? Who else could do that? It's just, it's brilliant. But then you've got the other side of him. Yeah, we've mentioned the sort of more serious bits. There are. So when he's really good talking scene with Maud Adams as Octopussy, and she's sort of almost trying to say to him, why don't you join us? You could earn a lot of money instead of working for a majesty. And he's, I'm not for sale. And that, I might have said this before, but that's the difference between Bond then and the Bond now, where he seems to be quitting every single day. He hates his job. He hates life. This Bond, he can get annoyed at M. And I think Brosnan's Bond does that brilliantly, where he really does go to the edge quite a lot. But M always backs him. So with this, though, when he's sort of saying, I'm not for sale, it's like Roger Moore is the most loyal out of all the actors, I think. In all his films, he's always loyal to M and Britain. And then later, on the mission, yeah, absolutely. And then later you'll see, again, his acting chops with the scene in the train with Gogol. And like, I don't suppose you give a damn about the hundreds of thousands of people who's like, and all. It's just, absolutely, this guy. And with the clown, in the clown maker, like, does that convince you? When he reveals himself that it's me. Yeah. It's just, it is, I think it is his best performance, and it just shows how good he is. And by this point, the producers, directors, script writers, they know exactly what to do and build it to his strengths. And I think that's why the film succeeds so much.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with this one, and I know I only watched it for the first time yesterday, but pretty much every single set piece, every single moment, location has stayed with me and still stays with me now. And, we've talked about moments that I want to go back to the opening scene, actually, Matt, that you mentioned with the, I was watching it and I knew there was going to be some clown stuff in there. I think I saw like a thumbnail or somewhere. So I knew that we were going to get like, Roger Moore clown at some point in the film, but I was like smacking my computer. I was like, has Joker started playing? Like, what's this, the whole like clown situation? But it's like really intense. And it kind of reminded me, it's like in the similar vein to the dog attack from Moonraker. And that it feels like you're watching a very, very different film. It's, it's really intense. And you kind of, although you are watching the ridiculous stuff with a clown running away from, like the twins, isn't it, with the throwing knives, it does have like a level of intensity to it. And you're kind of trying to catch up as the film goes on. It's like, okay, who's this clown? Why is he running away? What's special about this Fabergé egg? And then you realize that he is actually a 009 agent. I think that when Roger Moore does become a clown, which is, It is ridiculous, but because you know that 009 did it, and you know that's part of an agent's job is to blend in and be, you know, like a spy, an assassin, or whatever. It gives it a little bit more weight to the end, or at least a bit more of a setup. And you're right, the bit where he rips off the costume, and it's Roger Moore's serious acting, but in the most ridiculous costume. It just kind of goes to like the lengths that Bond is willing to go to. So I actually didn't have as big a problem. I do with the gorilla costume. That was stupid, but and I think even Broccoli himself said that he wasn't okay. Well, he wasn't okay with the gorilla costume or the clown costume, but yeah, I didn't have as big a problem with it as I initially expected. I love the moment as well where they learn that the suspect is in a clown costume and they grab the wrong guy who happens to be wearing this poor guy. Like, God knows what happened to him. Like, probably like just firing squad out back of the head or something, execution style. But okay, we've got to talk about some of these. Like, we've got Tarzan yell, remote control crocodile. I've got
really quickly mention 009. The image of crashing through the window, dying with the egg out, that terrified me as a child. You know what? Yeah. I mean, I think we've all been in a situation. The ITV used to be on nighttime in the week. Sometimes I remember you always get Saturday afternoons, and you'd get them like the weeknights. I remember the first time I saw Octopussy. Well, I didn't actually finish it. I turned off. I went to bed after the egg. I was scared because it's just like he's being hunted. I mean, it's a really like pretty. I love it. It's an actual twist within itself with the twins. We'll get to them later, but it's really like quite sad. And I believe is it the first other 00 agent we meet in the Bond films. I might need to double check that, but I think it's and they die. Like we find them at another 00 and they're going to die. I know it
might be the first time we meet.
Yeah, and obviously I know Chris is in Goldeneye, so I'm not going to mention a potential other 00 from
Living
that film.
Daylights as well.
Yeah, and this is the thing. It's a really interesting thing because the one things which I know this is a James Bond series, and no, thank you, Amazon. I don't want a 00 anthology series, but it's that sort of kind of world building type thing that there are other agents than James Bond, and it's just plotting them and seeing them as time goes by, and it's lovely to see it. But seeing one die is a pretty big deal, and the fact he's gone into embassy. So I really wanted to bring that up before we get to the Roger Moore stuff, but also. I don't mind the clown costume. Yes. It's funny, but at the same time, it kind of makes sense. I mean, like if there wasn't a circus, it wouldn't work, right? So I'm one of those that's just if he just happened to walk by like a joke shop and came out as a clown, I'd have an issue. But I've never minded the Roger Moore clown suit. It looks worse than what it is on photos and videos and behind the scenes. You ever see behind the scenes photos of Roger Moore dressed up in the clown outfit? You just look at him and think, man, does he really want to be James Bond still? But you watch it, no, he's still involved.
I love how like the audience is just like thinking it's part of the show as well, even down to the part where the bombs diffuse, like they're all applauding. It goes to like the bit that we mentioned, like the thing they're watching an air show at the beginning. I love all that stuff in the cutaways. I'm going to talk about the Tarzan stuff in a minute, but before I get onto that, because that was a whole experience, the Tarzan moment. I'm going to get onto that. I think one of the things that I love about this film the most, and which makes it feel even more unique as well, is the location itself being set in India, which 13 films in we still haven't been to, and I think they showcase it perfectly. It looks lush, it looks wonderful, like the action scene as well throughout the streets. Just absolutely love all the stuff that they do with India in the film. This had 3 screenplay writers. You had George MacDonald Fraser, who pitched the idea of having it set in India. I think he was writing a novel at the time, and I think his novel was set in India, so he'd done a lot of research into the location beforehand. I think the idea beforehand it was going to be set in Japan again, and it's kind of we've been there, done that. So I love that they went to India with this one, and they do get creative with the set pieces and the animals, and that takes me on to the Tarzan moment. So I don't actually know, Tom, if it was you who mentioned that there was like a Tarzan moment. I think you dropped it in there as like a potential with Octopussy. Had no idea what that entailed.
My God, when you saw it. What did you think though when you just saw it?
I can't even summon any words to talk about. As soon as it happened in the film, I had to kind of pause the film, run it back to make sure I just witnessed what had actually happened. And I think afterwards I paused the film for 10 minutes and I had to take a break. I was like, nah, okay, that's enough for right now. I'm going to come back to it in a minute. Okay, so my question to you guys is, did James Bond actually make that sound, or was that just like diegesis thrown over the top? Because it is the original Tarzan yell from like the original movie, which came out. I don't even know when it came out. That's what I want to know. Ooh. Was he being, he's like being a spy, secret and covert. He's in the treetops. Does he just randomly let out like a massive Tarzan? That's what I want to know. These are the real questions with Octopussy for me.
Absolutely.
This is what I want to talk about, the Tarzan scream, right? Because there's one thing I do to every Bond film. I don't know if you guys do this all. I can look at a set piece and think, would the other Bonds do this? And if they would, and how would they do it? And I look at the Octopussy one and I think, right, Connery, he isn't going to come to set that day. Dalton, he's not going to come to set that day. Daniel Craig, he's not going to come to set that day. George Lazenby, it's really hard because he did one film, so we'll leave him out of it. And Pierce Brosnan would do it and make it look cool. And I would say that. And then you think it's like Roger Moore, he would do a Tarzan scream, wouldn't he? So I'm going to go in the camp that Roger Moore's James Bond, it was probably a once-in-a-lifetime chance. He's on the run. He's being hunted. Why not? And that's the best way. It goes to the Roger Mooreisms. They know now whether there's someone. I think they get away with it. People might not, but only Roger Moore can get away with that. And it's what they're equipping it to. How many Bonds can go on a jungle safari? And come out. Roger Moore can do it. So I'm gonna lean in towards that. I would say, I know obviously the audio isn't Roger Moore, blatantly not Roger Moore, but I imagine that he probably was screaming it.
I mean, I've only ever thought that it was Bond making that noise, and it's difficult. It's so difficult to analyze it now. I've seen this film thousands of times since the age of like 4 or 5, so it's very hard to sort of separate it. And if that happened in No Time to Die, it'd be a bit like, what on earth are they thinking? I don't know. It's just those little moments. They just bring an instant bit of light relief, and it's not like that. The whole sequence isn't. There are really silly bits. There's silly bits within it, but the whole. The sequence isn't silly nowadays. Like an action comedy, that the nature of the chase would be silly rather than just one or two little bits peppered in. But I can't explain it. Yeah, I do think it is Bond making that noise, and I agree. I can only see either Roger or Pierce doing this, none of the others, and probably quite rightly as well.
That's such a good point. I've never thought about that before. I mean, obviously, I did know it was the official, a bit like the Wilhelm scream, isn't it? It's like the official sound effect. But I think it's just like, just look at this. This looks silly. I don't think it matters. But yeah, there's more of that, though. Of course, there's the sitter, there's that. But there's also, near the end, when he's in, Kamal Khan's palace, and he's like, goes down, he sees this tiger next to him. He's like, and then he uses it, and it's like, ah!
I was so confused about that bit.
It sounds like him, though. I don't know whose voice that is.
Yeah, I've thought of another couple of bits as well. Sorry, Tom. Well, there's also, whoa, when he pretends to be like a dead person, And there's also, it's not necessarily funny, but again, it messes with your mind a bit. Is when VJ as a calling card is, he's playing on his pipe, and then he suddenly plays the Bond theme, and Bond goes, "There's a charming tune." So it's like, what? James Bond knows his own theme tune, but I thought we were only privy to that. But anyway, sorry, Tom, I interrupted.
No, I love it. Again, you can. I'm not a fair critic of this film. I'm not, because I love it so much, and it was part of my childhood. And I'm probably hypocritical because, if it was in a new film, we'd be like, "What a load of rubbish! That's stupid." But it's Roger Moore, isn't it? So he can get away with it because he's good at it, because he sells it. And that whole scene, yes, there could be another version of that chase sequence, which is deadly serious and really effective, and would perhaps be better, you could say. But the whole way through it, it's so exciting. You've got so many different bits to it. And then at the end, he climbs on that little tourist boat, and are you with our group? No, ma'am, I'm with the economy tour. You don't get better gags up. I know that's another favourite quote. I mean, it's just only Roger. Maybe Pierce. I will give Pierce credit. I think he could have done
Mm.
this jungle scene. I think he could actually.
Yeah, and I think with those moments as well, like you mentioned, growing up with this film, I think it is a nostalgia thing, and going to the Tarzan connection in Return of the Jedi and Revenge of the Sith, there is a Tarzan yell from the Wookiees, from Chewbacca and Return of the Jedi, and I've always grown up with that film. That's part of that film. If a Star Wars film came out now with a Tarzan yell, then I'd be exactly the same. So I do think I do think it is a nostalgia thing very much, and oh god, I was going to mention something. You mentioned like the tiger carpet, like the skin of the tiger. I didn't think it was out of the realm of possibility in this film with all the many costumes that he wears. I thought he was going to throw it on and scare someone. I was like this close. I didn't know what his plan was, and then he kind of does nothing with it. He just throws it over the landing, and then it's like a distraction. I don't know. Weird. And I'm glad you mentioned the Snake Charmer song as well with the Bond theme, because these are the kinds of questions and how I break things down. When there's a fourth wall scene like that, I think so. The Bond theme now exists in universe, and he recognizes it as well. Like he's aware of this theme song that he, will do a dual take towards it.
Yeah,
it's like in Rocky V where when he lands back in the US and there's a brass band and it's playing "Gonna Fly" now. I'm like, okay, now we're taking the music and it actually exists in universe. It's always weird to me when that happens. I think.
Yeah. The way I rationalize it as much as I can, not that I particularly want to, but it's just that Bond's been told what the melody, Bond's been played a melody of something, and then like when you hear this, that's the guy you need to go and see. Not, hey, that sounds like my theme tune. Better go and speak to him. Yeah.
But there's so many great bits, like the remote control crocodile as well. Like, was Q just working that up for him? In case he's deployed in India. Here's a remote control alligator crocodile thing. It's fine. I love it. I love it all. I do think though the Tarzan thing, watching it now, was a little bit too far for me. It kind of was like reminded me of the moment in Man with a Golden Gun with the car stunt with the corkscrew. How you have the slide whistle. It's like where they add like a soundbite over. I'm like, you didn't need to do that. I could have just seen James Bond swinging in the trees and that would have been cool enough. But I don't want to belabor the point with it. But we had to talk about it. It is definitely a talking point with this movie, 100%.
I want to really quickly add with Q as well. Our message is to you, Chris. There's him going fishing in this film has a lovely payoff in The World Is Not Enough. And I'd never clocked that until yesterday. I don't think it's intentional. But I'd never thought. I was like, oh, he's fishing in this, and World's Not Enough. They mentioned about fishing, and I was like, I don't know if that's intentional, but if it's not, we've discovered that, and we'll claim it as our own. So that's our analysis. Breaking news, But no, I don't know what more I can add to Roger Moore. In truth, I mean, we could talk endlessly for Roger Moore for many hours in many years. But is it time to talk about the Bond girls now? I can't. Yeah, I can't do. Roger Moore has his own pronunciation of Octopussy. I'm not even going to attempt to do it, but I like the character. I love the fact that Maud Adams came back, and she has, by a country mile, one of the best scenes of the film when she's talking about her dad, which I believe is part of one of the short stories that Ian Fleming wrote. Which I don't normally, because I've not read the books yet and stuff like that. I don't normally get to bring the books up, but that scene feels so out of place in a fantastic way. Like, wow, this is an incredibly well-written moment that isn't consistent to the rest of this film. I'm not saying the film's written bad, but that's like some top-tier drama writing there, the character development. And then it's like Roger Moore, like one-liner. So it's a good thing still, but I think she's great in this. And also, I think you can buy her robe for like probably $3,000, knowing the 007 store prices. So for any diehards out there, just keep adding zeros onto what you think the values of things are worth.
Just on the robe, our friend David, licensed to queer on Twitter, doesn't he have that robe, Tom? Or
he does. Yeah,
robe
I'm going to say but wear that around the house. Superb.
Octopussy, or as I wasn't on our review episode of it, so they kept saying Octopus.
Louis Jourdan's
I said before, I think she's really good. She has great chemistry with Roger Moore. Feels strange nowadays to have the same actress coming back, but I thought she was really good in The Man with the Golden Gun. I think she's totally convincing in this. even her wardrobe's fascinating. Yes, she's got that robe, she's got that, that Indian blue dress, but then when she's in the circus, she has another couple of different looks, and like she's got her hair tied back, and obviously she's a very beautiful woman, but she has presence, and you do get the feeling that she knows what she's doing. She could run the operation as she does, and even though Kamal like double crosses her and everything, I don't know. You feel that she's not just a damsel in distress or a kept woman or anything like that. She's a properly strong female character, and yeah, I think she's a real highlight in the film, and possibly in the series as far as Bond girls go.
I think she's If you think of Roger Moore with his Bond girl, it's definitely Maud Adams, and I know the two of them were like really good friends, weren't they? So the chemistry's there, it works. I know Man with the Golden Gun you weren't a massive fan of, but certainly Maud Adams and the Scaramanga and that angle, it's all the other stuff I know is a bit, I can understand why people don't like that, but that she's such a fascinating character in it, and she's not in it that much, but she's really interesting and tragic. So in this, it's good to see her completely, like Matt says, it's a progressive character for the time, more progressive, I'd say, than any of the recent characters, particularly like Madeline Swan, his girlfriend at the moment. Always like to compare it. Anyway, yes. Maud Adams, she's very good. I think you buy her completely. The fact that she's got all these women around her, it's not just there just because, let's have a load of pretty women. It's sort of quite it's quite a new and unique thing to see. And like Kamal Khan's interplay with them, she still seems to have the authority, even though he's he's obviously the bad guy in it. He's not I don't think he's as evil as Orlov, but she's got that real authority through it. And I know people complain about the sort of grabbing a head for when they finally, have a bit of necking, but it's sort of like it works. I don't know, and the John Barry score to it is beautiful.
Oh yeah.
I think it's brilliant, and like the final bit where they're in the boat at the end, it's like the best of Roger, and I think Rob's mentioned, don't want to spoil License to Kill, but he thinks that maybe Tim ends up with Pam from that film, and I'd say probably Roger would end up with Octopussy over. If you had to, like you say, if you had to settle down with one of them.
Yeah, honestly, Maud Adams in this, probably one of my favorites in the series so far. I'd rank her that high. She's probably in my top 3 at the moment. Outstanding. Now, I was watching the whole film, looking at Maud Adams, not just looking at Maud Adams, but going, I know you from somewhere. And I didn't know at the time. Right. I remember reading at the time when it's Andrea, isn't it? Andrea Anders, is it? I think.
Anders, yeah.
I remember reading at the time when we did Man with the Golden Gun that she came back for multiple ones, but obviously over the weeks, and we've had many films since then, that just kind of slipped out of my mind. So I think she cameos in, is it A View to a Kill as well? I think I've read in some respect.
You don't see it.
Right. But I thought she was tremendous. I love what they did with the character, and you're right, she is strong. She can hold her own against Bond. She felt, you've had Bond girls before, especially like Agent Triple X, and that we love the concept of the character, but in the performance, you don't really get that sense of authority or being toe to toe with Bond. I get that with Maud Adams in this film.
Yeah.
And they're both perfectly matched. I love that she's kind of like the head of this smuggling ring, and she's sort of like made a life for herself through this, and there is this like unspoken connection. And you're right, the backstory, I think that was one of the very few things that they based on the book. I think it's a collection of short stories, isn't it? I think it's Octopussy and the Living Daylights. One thing I did love though is the Fabergé egg is listed as the property of a lady, which is another one of the short stories. So I thought that was quite a nice little connection there as well with it. But she's incredible, easily one of my favorites, and I love that she does sort of like run this organization of all these fighting women as well that get stuck in at the end. I do think it is incredibly progressive. The only thing that I don't think is progressive, and this is kind of like the thing at the time, is just like ethnicity. I think it would have been better to have like an Indian Bond girl.
I agree.
This is kind of what we said with Live and Let Die as well. that, you know, we would have liked a Bond girl of color in that film, and she kind of gets off like halfway through, and then it's, you know, it's back to the white woman again. And I do think that was a problem with Hollywood at the time, in that they did mention a couple of Indian actresses, but I think, you know, it was a white populated world in Hollywood at the time. Some could argue it still is in many ways, but it was definitely worse back then. They were even looking at white actresses that could kind of pass as like Indian heritage as well, you know, like dark haired and like darker skin, and that would never fly today. But with that being said, like Maud Adams in the film, she is tremendous, and we'll definitely talk about the score later, because honestly, this is right up there with All the Time in the World for me in terms of love themes, in terms of that orchestra version. And I guess there's kind of another Bond girl. There are many Bond girls you could argue with Maud Adams' crew that she's got. We're not going to talk about them all individually, but we do have one of the other ones as well, which is Magda with Christina Wayborn. I kind of like her character as well. She doesn't have as much to do, obviously, than the titular character, quite rightly so, but you know, there are moments where she kind of stands up to Bond as well, and she serves the purpose of being that Bond girl for like your first act of your film before you start getting into the nitty gritty of the plot itself. But they don't go too overboard with the Bond girls in this one in terms of like the main ones that he hooks up with. But yeah, I think they're both good in their own right in this film.
Yeah, I mean, I think Octopussy is the best by country, but Magda's a really funny one, because it's like she's just trying to get the egg from Kamal Khan, and he knows he's going to give it to her because he wants to listen in and everything, but he'll still make a night of it because it's Roger Moore, and that's what he's going to do. So it's a real one. And also it's got one of my favorite weird stunts in Bond, when she's like sort of backdrops out the window and it unravels. And I know this is really sadistic, but we kind of joked in the last one, I'd love to see like a spin-off series, like Q's inventions gone wrong. I would be so fascinated. Like, what had happened if like it wasn't tall enough by like 20 foot, and she was just like stuck on the edge of the window? You know, it's incredible. But I don't want to see it obviously get neck snaps and stuff. But yeah, it was a really weird character. But you know, Octopussy is the character in the title of the film, and you're kind of waiting for it to come on screen as well. And you know, the whole build up that we've got her in scenes, and we're not going to see her as well. It's building up to this really interesting character. And I can't say her as a villain. I know that some people try and look at her as a villain, but she's with them to a point, but she's in it for her own sort of smuggling gains, not, you know, nuclear weapons and whatnot. So I quite like the pairing in this, and I'm glad this one leans more towards the let's not just kill them off quickly.
I was going to say, if a character was going to die, I thought it would be Magda would be off, because she kind of fits that bill, doesn't she, a bit?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think it really works well. Like you say, in Bond films, they often have that sort of first Bond girl who isn't the sort of principal Bond girl, and sometimes that can be, you know, let's say, I think Moonraker, I think you touched on this a bit, where perhaps he had more chemistry with Corinne Clery than he did with Lois Chiles, possibly. But here, they do have like good chemistry, but you know that both characters are sort of using each other, if you know what I mean, and it's just a sort of mutual, it's a mutual kind of thing, and then it doesn't feel that by the time he gets to meet Octopussy, you're thinking, well, hang on, I thought you had a real connection with Magda. It doesn't feel like that at all. And she, not only does she not die, she's not a sacrificial lamb. She comes back to help at the end, isn't she? One of the she's one of Octopussy's girls, and so. You know, I think that's pretty cool. And yeah, just something I meant to mention with Octopussy as well is the fact that she gets stuck in, and she, she's not afraid to like, pull a gun on someone. Or what I really like, and I'll be mentioning this scene as much as I possibly can. The bomb, what would you call it? It's not diffuse. He doesn't diffuse the bomb, but he sort of what would you call it?
It kind of is a bomb.
Removes the core out.
Yeah. So anyway, in that scene when Bond's being stopped and held back by police, Octopussy recognizes that she trusts Bond, his judgment and everything on this, and so she's the one who grabs a policeman's gun and then shoots the thingy, the lock on it to open it up. And I don't know. I think that's a really it's just one little character thing beat that happens, but it shows a lot of things about her, that she's not afraid to get stuck in. She has such trust in Bond that she will, risk being arrested herself, and do what's necessary to get the job done.
Yeah, and it's in this world where men rule and everything, it's like the other characters assume that. So when Kamal Khan and Gobinda sort of assume that she'll just go along with all this, and she doesn't, which is great. And there's also a bit more tenderness that you see with other Bond girls. So when another crocodile scene, when there's that fight and they go out the window at night, out of the bedroom, and the guy's had his octopus on his face, and she's worried, and you don't know which one's Bond. Is one of them dead? And it's like a face looking. And again, she's got a gun, So there you go.
Yeah.
In terms of Magda, I think it's an unusual one. I know some people think she's not the best actress and everything. She's Swedish as well, so they're both Swedish.
Both Swedish,
you just think of them as English, don't you? I suppose, but or American. Well, yeah, she's introduced really well at the auction, which is we'll mention that later because that's probably my favourite scene. And then, the sort of meet cute is at the casino. They have a little bit of a chat there, and then they're in bed together, and it's just the most lovely John Barry Q, the loving cup, the champagne, and Moore's faces are just like sort of this, and he doesn't quite. She says she's got her scrapbook, and he's like, what? But yeah, that's where it gets a bit confusing with the egg, isn't it? With what? Hang on, does she know that he? And she does, because she deliberately puts it so he can see it in the mirror, I think. And they both know what's going on, and then Gobinda's there as well, so Bond didn't know that. And even Kamal Khan's at the bottom, isn't he? So he sort of shows himself to Bond, and we all know what's going on here. And yeah, and then later on as well, she's obviously part of the circus, Magda, and she's like a ringleader, isn't she? And then she sort of warns Octopussy, saying he'll put the entire operation at stake. So she's still thinking about everything they've achieved as businesswomen and all that, the smuggling and all that sort of stuff. But that's when it differentiates, because Octopussy is like, no, this is really important. People are going to die here. So I think they're great. And yeah, like you say, it's good that they both stay alive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think someone said no sacrificial lamb. There is a sacrificial lamb in this film with the steam sheep head, which is a fun scene itself. It reminded me of Temple of Doom, the children brains part a little bit.
Yeah. In India again,
Yeah. We need to talk about the villains in this thing, because my God, what a section this is. I think these might be some of my favorite villains in Bond so far. Good. Who do we want to start with? Do we want to start with General Orlov, or do we want to go Kamal Khan first on this one?
Oh, let's go Orlov, because he's in his own. He's in his own little section, because everyone's with. Let's go Orlov.
His own film, I think.
So you've got Steven Berkov playing General Orlov. I know him from the first Beverly Hills Cop film as Victor Maitland. Really good character actor, really good villain as well. And in that film, he's really intense and he's very scary. He's got this like stoic quality to him. In this one, he's just chewing all of the scenery, and I am so down for it. Like the first scene when they're on that like revolving platform, it's like the United Nations kind of looking thing. He's rolling his R's every single sentence. He's just this crazy Soviet guy that just wants to plunge the world into a World War III and just conquer the earth. He's fantastic, and I love him, and he brings such a personality to the character. I think my only problem with him is that he doesn't get all that much to do. They kind of pitch him as like the main villain, and I really don't think he is that. I think that Kamal Khan is easily sort of like the main villain of the film, which is a shame, because Orlov had so much personality. And I didn't like his death scene at the end. He's just, they think he's like a deserter, don't they, or something, or a defector, and they just gun him down on the train tracks. I do like that he goes out, like his dying breath is still like this cause that he believes in, like he's a complete nutcase, but I would have liked to have seen more of him, especially from that opening scene where he's just given so much gravitas and he's just larger than life as a character. I don't feel like they did as much with him as possible. And the story itself is kind of conflicting. It's almost like you've got two, like with the villains that they have, it feels like you've got two plots for like a completely different Bond film. You could have Orlov and like this whole nuclear arms thing. And then you've got the more sort of like Diamonds Are Forever dual diamond heist kind of thing going on with all the rest of it with the Fabergé egg. So I love his character in it. He's brilliant, but I don't know. I think they could have done more with him in the film, I think. Yeah,
I'm kind of standing on the edge, because I know that the USSR stuff's going to pop up in a really good film at some point in the next sort of 20 years of Bond discussions on this bit. So I like Orlov, but we don't get enough of him. But he has one of those, when you have like villainous deaths that are just terrible, but it's like incredibly like this is Dark Knight Rises, Marion Cotillard, right? When she just like the truck crashes and she like breathes and like her head turns. That's what all of reminds me of. But then he like goes out like a predator, like he thinks he's like won and he's kind of nothing. But it's a really weird one because I love the whole dynamic that he wanted. I mean, it works, right? You want to start a World War III. You've got we've still got they talk about having Berlin. So I think the Berlin Wall's still up. All that kind of political stuff at the time and. When we've had so many Bond and Russia things, you forget that it is still around in the mid-'80s. And it's this really interesting dynamic that I don't think, because the film has had the megalomaniacs, your Spectres, you had your Moonrakers going up there in space, you've forgotten about the on-the-ground current political crisis. And it's actually quite nice to go back to that USSR type thing that they want to take control. They want to kickstart a war because they know that they would destroy them. And it's a simple premise that's been done many times, but I think it's very effective. And I quite like him. I just think it's a bit ridiculous, but that's what you want from a Bond villain, right? How many memorable Bond villains aren't over the top or have distinguishable features? None of them. And I think that's where Orlov sort of stays in. And I do like him, but I like the fact that we don't have too much of him, that we keep time with Khan and a couple of his henchmen more so. Because if you'd have had more Orlov, I think you'd have got bored of him.
Yeah, obviously I agree. I mean, he really does. He certainly makes the most of his minutes on screen. Mm-hmm. Some incredible, the emphases and the way he says his lines are absolutely ridiculous. This corrupt and just decadent. But I think it's interesting because he is really the main villain in the film, but the film doesn't quite want you to see that, or doesn't they want Kamal Khan's much calmer and he's almost I don't know, he'd be quite a nice guy. I think the first time you spoke to him, you think he'd be do you know what I mean, rather than I mean General Orlov's pretty horrid, but I do like it how I think they were keen to show this, that it's not like all Russians bad, West good. It's like there's this crazy guy who wants to take advantage of this situation and do it for like world dominance for Russia. Yeah, it's really important that you've got the strong continuous character of General Gogol there, who acts as like a sort of an ally or a kind of Russian hero to Orlov's villain. And so therefore I think it works in a sense that they're the ones who kill him rather than Bond. Because it's because he's crossing into West Berlin, is it? Or I think that's what's happening. Yeah. So I think it works in that way, and also because the way the film's structured is that you have the India bit, then you have the Germany bit with the train and the circus, and then the final act coda being back in India. Well, there's no reason for Orlov to be there. He came there once, but that was for a meeting. So he's a pretty ridiculous character, but again, I wouldn't swap him for the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think he is trying to get he's trying to get on that train, because then they can't. He's going into it'll be East Berlin, won't it? Which is Soviet run. I think that's why he's so desperate to get there, and then he's safe. So I think then you've got Gogol, of course, he's an ally. You'll notice he'll be in quite a few of these films in the 70s and the 80s until basically the Cold War ends. And a lot of the spy work, if Fleming was alive and writing in the 80s, he'd be writing about this. I think it would all be about Russia and the effects of the Cold War. So I think he's just a pantomime villain, isn't he? It's very difficult when you've got two villains to make it work, and this and Living Daylights have got that, and it creates a problem, for the director and the filmmakers, because how do we buy into the one, massive nemesis that we've got? So you've had that in the last few films, you'll have it with Sanchez in the next film. How do you sort of make it work where you've got one bad guy who's a nutter and another one who's less of a nutter? So Living Daylights, people often complain that you've got one charming guy and then you've got another guy who's not much of a threat, so it doesn't equal much of a threat. But in this, you've definitely got, I think, Kamal Khan is the main villain, but Orlov is the sort of main Bond villain in the film, and it works because they're both using each other for their schemes. I know we don't understand it. I'll never understand it, the scheme, but it is something that I think he's trying to generate money through selling these fake.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Fabergé eggs to fund his war, basically, isn't he?
He's like ferrying them into the West, isn't he? For reasons.
Who knows? And they sort of meet, don't they? Of course, at the palace, which Bond only hears bits of, which is quite good because the audience is always like, "Oh, not quite sure what's going on. We're only hearing bits of this. We'll only find out later." And all of he's just one of those over the top camp villains. I think he's great.
The main villain, though, we've mentioned him a bunch of times, Kamal Khan. Jesus Christ, easily probably one of my favorite Bond villains so far. I absolutely love the performance of Louis Jordan in this. He just absolutely kills every single scene that he's in. And right from his introductory scene, I think it's absolutely tremendous. I'm a sucker for the Bond villain where they're at like a casino table or some kind of setting like that, whether you've got all their kind of wagering over a game. You've got Goldfinger, where he's cheating, isn't he? He's got one of his associates in the window looking down. Le Chiffre, when we eventually get to him, Casino Royale, absolutely tremendous. Any kind of thing where it's that battle of wits over some kind of game. And obviously you've got the backgammon game in this one. And it's just the dick measuring contest, really, isn't it? Over the two of them, like both of them are like perfectly matched with each other, and he's just absolutely tremendous. He brings like this really like cold, calculating edge to every single scene that he's in. I love that. He is tied to so many different things. We mentioned, he's tied to Orlov, but he's also got like his own smuggling scheme going on, and he's trying to win over Octopussy and all these things. And I think the thing that I love about him the most is just like how like bold he is. Like he quite openly declares that Bond, I will kill you. I will find a way to kill you. I'm going to kill you. It's going to happen. And just accept it. He's absolutely tremendous. And I think I'm jumping on ahead, but that backgammon game probably is one of my favorite scenes, probably like my top two scenes. Punctuated beautifully as well by Gobindo when he crushes the dice at the end. It's just tremendous. I love it. Even like the final scene. I'm going to save that for my favorite scene though, like the entire action set piece at the end. I think he works as the villain. And he's not as sort of over the top crazy as Orlov is, but he is like a nice offset to that character type. I think he's more of a traditional Bond bad guy, like the sort of like the cold stoic one, but through the performance of Louis Jordan, he can make it his own and bring a real sort of like stamp to the character, I think.
And I think that's why I think Khan stands out by himself, that he's dangerous, right? And he's dangerous, but it's not, I'm going to nuke you all, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. You can just watch him and think that's a guy that could cause some damage. Don't know how, don't know when, don't know why, but he's just someone immediately. And it's a really hard villain to sort of not decipher, because his aim stuff, but it's just a bit different. He doesn't have, yes, he's got a palace, he's wealthy, but he doesn't have a satellite, he doesn't have an underwater base or anything like that. And you want sort of villainous things, looking at it on a modern lens, the whole hunting dynamic as well, that makes you think, cool. I mean, it's nothing on the film, but looking at it in the modern light, it's like, oh my God, what a horrible person. But you kind of attach him because it is such a good performance, and I can never really make my mind upon him because I do really like him as a villain. And I think he works so well, but because we not get enough time with him, that there's just something missing about him. But that's why he works, that he always feels like he's never, because he's so calm until his death, that you never know what he's going to do because of how stoic he is. And I think that's why I really like him, that you feel like there's something missing, but that's a compliment, not criticism, that his villainous is up there in his head. He knows exactly what he's going to be doing, and the way he goes about it, hiring assassins as well, and playing everyone against one another. I think he's incredible, and I think he's a very low key Bond villain that not a lot of people talk about. And when actually you need to put everyone together in like a sort of mugshot or something, he's one that's probably actually quite high up there when you really drill into it.
Yeah, I mean, I can only really echo what you guys were saying. It's so, as I was saying before, I didn't mean that Kamal Khan is a nice guy, but what I mean is he's far more understated and sort of calm compared to Orlov, and so it's strange because he would never be the type of villain who would give a speech to loads of people about, how they're going to change the world and everything like that.
Gustav Graves.
And yeah, yeah, or Drax or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think it's interesting because whilst the main threat comes from Orlov in terms of the damage that they could do to the world, the main story almost of the film is to do with Octopussy, and it's the India that it's Octopussy and Kamal Khan, and so that's why it works well as a kind of an end bit. And again, he's not going to be one of those villains that's going to be doing grand speeches. He's also not a physical threat, so he's not going to be one of those ones where Bond's going to have a big end fight with him, and that's where Govinda comes in. So I think that might be why he gets a bit more forgotten. But he's really good, and he really owns that role. And you're convinced that he is this wealthy guy who's doing all these, dodgy things and everything. And he makes an impact when you see him in the auction scene without ever saying anything. He does that really well. And then the backgammon scene, and then the dining scene, really terrific. It's a terrific performance, and I think he's wonderful in the role. I think the only possible criticism would be it should be an Indian actor, but we've sort of discussed that. You mentioned that about Octopussy and everything, so that might be the only criticism. But as far as I'm concerned, I think he's brilliant and a really understated, but very should be made more of in the Bond canon.
Yeah, I think they sort of. Maybe he's got like Moroccan or Algerian ethnicity, isn't he? Because he's French, and then giving him the name Khan and saying he's an exiled Afghan prince, it sort of just about passes as he could be there for some reason in India. But he looks the part. He is one of the best actors, I think, who's played villain. It's this, Mark Kermode will talk about it all the time. It's showing, not tell. It's not, which you could say is the opposite of Orlov. In that he's all doing all that, which is great. But Kamal Khan is like, when he's just there at the auction, and then you see, like Matt said, you don't see him do anything dreadful, and a bit like Silver in Skyfall, you don't see him physically do anything. He's a nutter somehow. Okay, Silver's probably a lot nastier than Kamal Khan, I reckon. But in that scene where the lovely dining scene, obviously it's a bit stereotypes of the food and all that, but when they're sort of just talking, I never really realised they were talking about torture methods, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's like, although Bond doesn't seem too scared, which is good, it's sort of showing that Kamal Khan is prepared to get nasty. And another thing, we watched it quite recently, the first time, 5 of the 6 of us managed to watch a film together since we started this podcast. We had to choose Octopussy. But there's so many things we sort of realised which didn't make sense before. So when there's those 2 guys who we've mentioned, you find in the body bags, and Bond does whoa, tends to be them. Those 2 were the people who linked him with Orlov because they brought in the bomb, I think, or they brought in the jewels. So basically, he just tells Govinda to kill them, and I never realised that. So that's why you see them hung up later on.
Oh, in the meat, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realise that. So I think it's like that's another you might not realise it, but he is actually he's a bit of a bad guy. He's not just all charm, he's pretty nasty. And that, at the end of that backgammon scene, which is clearly a nod to Goldfinger, the golf scene with the cheating, the villain cheating at the game, and then Govinda, odd job with the balls, and this time it's the dice. But the way, he leans in and he's like, I'm onto you, and Bond is even better, Kamal Khan. He says his name, I know who you are, I'm going to make sure you don't succeed with your plan, and it's just brilliant.
Yeah, it's the bit where Bond brings out the Fabergé egg and he says this is what I'm wagering, and just all the stuff. I just love how money's no object to him as well. When he loses, he's just clicks over and just the checkbook, and he's really quite foppish when he does it. And he's like, I suggest you spend the money quickly, Mr. Bond. It's yes, this is class. Love it, absolutely.
I intend to, Kamal Khan. Yeah,
so good, so good. And I guess Govinda as a henchman, I thought he was great. But I'm thinking now back to the film. Govinda isn't the one who kills VJ, is it? I think that's just another
this is what I want to
henchman. And I have a problem with that because whoever the other
most-
henchman is, that weapon, it's like
Yeah.
the sort of like this horrific
The
weapon. It
yo-yo
kind of
saw.
yeah,
It's
it
called the
reminds me
yo-
of like Kill Bill, like what Go-Go has when she fights the bride in Kill Bill 1. And VJ's death is like absolutely horrific, like goes through his face. But I think that would have had more impact if it had been Gobinda's character as like the main henchman. But I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Can we talk about the most impractical weapon in cinematic history? That every time, this is why it's incredible. Imagine being like, because you've got the weird like assassins when they're all laughing and it's a bit creepy and it feels very Temple of Doom. I know this film came out before.
Yeah.
But it's like, what's your weapon? It's a yo-yo, all right. So how do you kill people? Well, I must always be elevated above them. And it's like, that's why it's so incredible. Because when VJ's death's really sad, because I really like VJ. And then it's even darker because Q's like, oh, he was still alive when I found him. I was like, but like when they're in bed together as well, it's like, oh look, the bed is primed over a staircase. Looks up and it's the drop, and I just kind of sit like, this was like the original Final Destination film. Like, what does he do? This assassin, like, I want to know more. Do they sign contracts as who's the victim? Okay, we'll make sure we get him when we're elevated, and it's incredible. And I don't know why I'm so like minute with it, but I just think it's a yo-yo saw. Like it's like attached to his arm as well. Like I was checking it as well, and it's incredible. And it's Bond. You want gadgets, but how often do villains get good gadgets? Now I don't know if it's good or not. That's another conversation. But
it works.
What savage use? Yeah, it works exactly. And the most like. I mean, I couldn't get over the fact that without bringing politics into it, that VJ, it was a spitting image of Rishi Sunak. I really struggled with that. Yeah, exactly. But oh no, incredible! And also, like when he's like using weapons as tennis rackets, so in films, quality.
Oh, well, he's a professional tennis player, wasn't he?
I was going to say, the actor's so perfect. But I needed to mention that because I love Gobinda. But it was like that little like horde of assassins that come in and all get batters was just really bizarre, but incredible.
Yeah. So, I mean, I like the guy with the yo-yo saw. I do think that I hadn't actually, because it's just so part of my life. Like I've not really thought about how impractical it is, but yeah, of course it is. But it's so memorable. You know, you really. Is it
a real weapon? I need to check. Is it
probably.
Like an actual?
Someone's probably created it after watching it.
Yeah.
Oh no, fictional assassination weapon. No, it's not. It's not a real thing.
Maybe it would be part of something else, or I don't know.
Yeah, you couldn't lower it on a string and it being buzzing around at the same time.
Yeah, and then when it comes back to you, that's so dangerous.
Yeah.
I get scared with a tape measure when I like retract one of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, just to talk about Gobinda. I mean, I think he's again probably underrated. He's a perfect henchman because particularly when the primary villain doesn't pose as much of a physical threat, then that's when a big strong henchman like this comes in. Hardly any dialogue. Again, there are very odd job vibes about him. But what I really like is that he's, we're in India. He's an Indian man, and I really like it when it's like one with the culture and one with the and he's very imposing physically. Hardly any lines. Dinner 8 o'clock. Much like our job, we get the crushing of the dice to show the physical threat. You're immediately scared of him. Perhaps we could have done to have seen him actually kill. I don't know whether you actually see him kill someone. I'm not entirely sure about that.
No, I can't remember. I don't think so.
No, but I think he's really good, and he's one of the best henchmen that we've had. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. He's another. He's obviously a really crisp-looking guy. He's Indian. He is a physical threat. He's quite. He's still very smart. He's never in like jeans and the tee. Okay, he's in the safari bit, but yeah, that chase as well on the the little vehicles is brilliant through India, and he's got his like blunderbuss, colonial gun that he's using.
He's got some kind of like shuriken as well, hasn't he? It's like a spike disc. That's cool as well.
Yeah, he's got his sort of sword, obviously, on the top of the train. He's got that scene, and he's just a great big guy. And that's another one of the hilarious moments when Bond he says he's putting him back to his room after they have that meal, and says like, he asks Mag, doesn't he, for a nightcap, and then he sort of intervenes, and then I don't suppose you'd fancy a nightcap. So yeah, no, Gobinda's top, and yeah, I know you want to talk about the end scene on the plane later because that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I need to talk about that scene absolutely.
Yeah.
I think
VJ as well, though. I mean, VJ, yeah.
We always love and I know you guys have done like a recent video, like 3 parts so far with like the allies, but I think we had a commenter as well mentioning they love seeing the allies in the field, like in the locations. I think VJ is probably one of the best. He's just so likable, and you know, he doesn't get loads of scenes, but he leaves that impact in the film, and you remember him. I think you remember him for like the pretty horrific death as well, like that edit, that cut, like when like, that stayed with me. And then I guess the other villains that we need to talk about are the twins, Mishka and Grishka. And just looking at the list of villains that we've got here, right? It's like how they managed to juggle all these different villains in this film. So wildly different from each other. You've got the crazy Soviet general guy. You've got like this Indian like heritage smuggler guy, and then the Indian henchman. And then you've got like circus sideshow knife throwing twins. It's such a random combination. It's like a real like hodgepodge of villains, but for some reason they all come together in the film and it just works for it. I really liked them. I thought they were really nice novelty kind of characters, and it was that initial reveal at the beginning where he shows up and I thought, can they like teleport, or like what's going on here? And then you realize that they're actually twins, and it's that connection at the end as well, where he's trying to get revenge on the death of his brother when he's like finally got Bond cornered. So again, not loads to do with them, but they're memorable. All you really need is like a character with either definable costume, look, or like trait to them, and they've got it. Master assassins. They prove in the film that they're proficient with the throwing knives, and they do pose a match for Bond. Like they almost get the better of him, but he's Roger Moore, James Bond. He's going to get out of it somehow. So. Yeah, it's so strange. Like when you step outside yourself and just look at all the villains that you've got from this film, you wonder how they all kind of match with each other. Well, they don't match with each other, but it kind of works for the film itself, I guess.
Yeah, and I think as well with these two is that I kind of mentioned earlier, they're quite scary, but even the reveal of them being twins, it's so well shot because you've got the chase, and what they do with cinematography is in the distance behind. They'll have 009 at the forefront, but you see one just run across the back. And then it's not even like, let's wait 20 seconds. It's like, boom, you've gone right into them. Oh, twins. And I think it's one of those tropes with the henchmen, and I don't see them as henchmen, although they are, because obviously we've had so many in this one, but they do enough to stand out and be their own thing. And even in the matching costumes, it's like the red and the black, and that plays into Roger Moore and stuff, but they're a threat in the film and they're memorable. And you'll look back and think, Octopussy, a lot of henchmen, and even more insane to sort of hype up next week as well. How do you top Octopussy's villains? Well, we'll get to that in a week's time, but they do, which is even
You're
more.
You're bringing a Christopher Walken, that's what you do.
Exactly. And that's the credit of this film, is that Roger Moore, and Roger Moore has great moments with every single one of them. If Roger Moore can't act well around them, then they're not going to work as well. Their threat needs to be matched by how they are with Bond, and he's absolutely perfect.
Yeah, they're brilliant, Mishka and Grishka, because they're not. I don't feel that they overshadow Gobinda as like the primary kind of henchman, but they do have a place, and we've had that scary first scene. We know they pose a real threat. They've got that costume. I do love it when Bond has to disguise himself or whatever, so he ends up wearing their costume, and then I can't remember whether it's I think it's Grishka is the one he fights at the end, kills second, because does the other one say Mishka, because he thinks it's him, and then when he pins Bond against the door of that hut, and our video copy, because we had them taped off TV, it didn't show you what happened too brutally, but the way he opens the door and then uses one of the knives to kill him, and he says, and that's for Grishka has just said, and this is for my brother, and then Bond says, and that's for 009. It's pretty. You say about the darker moments from Roger Moore. That's quite that's up there in this film again, and it's a really good, memorable kind of death. And obviously, they're then dealt with in the circus bit, so that they're not jarringly there at the end.
And just really quickly, that one-liner there, that did kind of catch me off guard, that it was like a really nice sort of like retribution moment for 009, because I was expecting like Arnie from Commando, or is it Predator? It's like stick around.
Predator.
I was expecting something like that, especially from Roger Moore, but the fact that it's like, no, it's not a joke, it's just that's for 009. I think that's nice moment.
There's something else I wanted to mention as well, is that it's pretty epic that 009, this is what 00 agents do. They his last act and what he wants to do is to deliver that Fabergé egg to the British Embassy, I think it is where it is, or whatever. Absolute commitment to the job, rather than, and I don't want to seem like we're always Daniel Craig bashing, but it does seem that there's not that same level of kind of respect to the job and the duty, and even the way he speaks to M, or M speaks to him and stuff. I just think it's pretty, 009 does that as his last act, and then Bond says, and that's for 009, my fellow 00 agent who you killed. It's amazing.
It's that danger, isn't it, of, again, the Cold War, because he's going through enemy lines. He's desperately trying to get, because we don't have this now. You'd get shot if you were seen, even if you were from Berlin and you went to see someone across the wall, see your family, you'd get shot. It was that bad. So the fact that he's desperately doing that, he's risking his life, shows how serious the stakes are. And I think you've got to give director John Glenn, again, the credit, because we've said, how many plates is he spinning with this? Not just the amount of characters, the plot, and the way that it's the circus. And that's one of the first images you see of the circus, and you think, what? So then you think, oh, it's not serious. And then the clown, and then this is serious, and you get the twins coming in. And the way that those characters are actually circus folk, aren't they, essentially? But they're also used by Kamal Khan, unbeknown to Octopussy. It's her circus venture. Kamal Khan and Kabinda are using them to kill people. This has been going on. She doesn't know anything about that, remember? So I think it's brilliant. I think, like you say, the way they come in and out, I don't know how John Glenn manages to do all this. And they're like, that again, that's another highlight for me, that way that he disposes of him. And you get another little really serious bit on the score from John Barry and that's for 009, and it's like, goodness me. And the costumes. And Rob are on that. He doesn't like the costume for some reason. I think it's great.
Yeah, and you mentioned like John Glenn. I think we had a comment last week, or a few people commenting, saying that they probably say that Glenn is their favorite director of the Bond films in what he is able to do. And like from the two, although I wasn't a big fan of the last movie, just tonally, but the direction in it was still absolutely outstanding, like without question. It wouldn't be a Bond retrospective review, if we didn't talk about the music. So I think we should move on to like the main theme itself now, and indeed the score that goes with it. Barry returns. It's like every other film, we keep saying that. For tax reasons, he wasn't available for Your Eyes Only. I think was it Bill Conti, we said, did the music to that one, I think. Very sort of like funk and like a bit of synth in there too. But there is always that moment where Barry comes back to do a Bond score where it's like, this just feels right. And you can kind of... even like this unspoken kind of sense from the film, just the sound from it, and like the sweeping orchestra and the strings, he's just completely at home with the Bond films. But the song itself, All Time High. So, Rita Coolidge did the song, and it was lyrics by Tim Rice. As a song, I like it. It's a solid song. As a Bond song, I'm not going to lie, it's not one of my favorites. It kind of feels like it would be right at home in like an opening to a sitcom or something. It's this very sort of like nice, airy kind of song, but it doesn't really have that kind of Bond sound to it. It's not like the brass or anything like that. It's more akin to sort of like a Moonraker or a For Your Eyes Only, sort of like the more sort of ballad kind of songs, which I absolutely love. And it's a solid song. I think it's fantastic. But I don't know. It doesn't quite have that same impact in like the opening title sequence, I don't think, as a song. But I do love the orchestra variation to it, though. Like, and that's usually a thing that crops up in a lot of these Bond films, is even if I'm not keen on the actual song, I think like Man with a Golden Gun, like the song to that. But when you hear the string version come up in the film, it's just completely just, elevates the song as a whole. And I'm going to say, like, orchestra version of All Time High, which crops up during like the romantic scenes in this film, I'm going to put it up there with All the Time in the World, the orchestra variation of that. I still think that that is probably his best love song from that film, and it just fits so beautifully into that film as well, with like the tragic ending. But this is a close second for me. And since watching this last night, I've been listening to Barry's score for this for All Time High, just nonstop. Absolutely outstanding. And I think that when you think of Roger Moore, yes, like his first two, you could argue that they still went into it very much with the mindset of they like Connery and like what he brought to the role, and for those first two especially. But when you think about like Roger Moore at his peak, like as Bond, it's more of the ballad romantic songs that intrinsically tie in with him, and I think that goes to show it's like that other layer to him, that he is the most romantic Bond, like charming and romantic Bond out of all of them, and you believe all the love stories in all of his films in those moments. And yeah, just fantastic score to this one. And the fact that they play the Bond theme so much in it as well, asserting their dominance over Never Say Never Again, but it's always, you always get a kick out when that comes on.
Yeah, I actually love the sound. I think it's one of the strongest soundtracks of the films up to this point. I think that's a really big thing. And again, it's John Barry coming back. All Time High. This is what I was kind of thinking. Because obviously, I'm not going to jump on a pedestal to say I know music, but you know, when you look at the Roger Moore, Chris, you sort of bang on, they're more like ballads. They're not big brass. They're not this. And if you look at if you were to group all the Bond themes up for each individual Bonds, Roger Moore's is kind of consistent. It kind of weaves into the old Connery into his own. And then as we transition next week, we get something quite special indeed. But I've never liked this song, and it's not the film's fault. I watched Ted when I was younger. If anyone's ever seen that comedy with Mark Wahlberg, and obviously they have the rendition of it, and I think I was not attached to it more in that, but you know, when eventually with a song, someone somewhere does a version of it, and that sticks with you more than the original, and it kind of did that. So whenever it comes on my Bond theme plays, you get the sort of like saxophone thing. I'm like, skip. Right, Dran, here we go. And it's kind of where it's sort of placed, but I love the score, and I think with John Barry as well, coming back to it, it's what they need for against Never Say Never Again. Like, this is, you know, again, it's easy to look at now, but that was like war back then. I've kind of finally thought, what is it? It's when it was into their wrestling, it was like a WCW versus WWE in the 90s.
Yes, that's
it. Was
it.
probably as political you're going to get. We need to beat the exact same show. We need to put everything else, try and top them, and John Barry's going to be our not secret weapon, but he's one of the many weapons we're going to have to bring out to maximize to do it. So there is that, but I truthfully, theme-wise, not a fan of it. I think I don't know if Cubby Broccoli was keen, but I know it was more Barbara Broccoli was encouraging him to eventually get him to hire us. So yeah, it's just one that is there, but the actual, Chris, as you said, the score behind it, I think works better for more than the vocals on it. And I'm gonna, it's not as bad as Sam Smith, but it's along that traction, right? When you're loving the score behind it, not what's actually being sung. So nothing is as bad as that, though, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with you pretty much. I like the song. It's certainly not one of my favorites. Pretty forgettable. You know, you sometimes have to remember, oh, what's the theme song from Octopussy? You know, they're a bit hamstrung in that they can't call a song Octopussy. But still, you know. But having said all that, for me, having John Barry is more important than that. Well, you know, I'd personally rather have a brilliant John Barry score and an okay theme song than the other way around. You know, a bit like Tom might disagree with me here, but I think the GoldenEye, the song is brilliant, the score not great. So you know, John Barry's scores, I think there's something really timeless about them. They're absolutely beautiful, and the way that All Time High can be used as a love theme throughout the film. But then there are also, you know, some exciting action themes within there. You know, the way that he has been able to use a completely different soundtrack for every film. You know, a different score with different melodies and stuff is incredible, really. So yeah, I think it's something that I can't see happening, but we've been banging this drum. The composer for the films, I would like to see consistent for a period. We had David Arnold, and I want to see them involved with co-writing the, not necessarily just writing, but co-writing the song with the artist. I don't think they'll do that now because they're desperately trying to appeal to a younger audience, and they're also getting in directors who are more auteurs, so they want to bring their own composers in. So it changes from film to film. Whereas here we had like the machinery of Bond, the team. So getting John Barry in is John Glenn wouldn't have gone right. Well, I actually want to get in someone different. I want to get Maurice Jarre in this time or something. No, John Barry. We're having John Barry. Again, like I say, I can't see it happening. I can't see the producers insisting that the composer co-writes the songs with them. That for some reason feels dated. It shouldn't do. But the last time we had that was Chris Cornell, David Arnold writing with Chris Cornell, which I think worked really, really well.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go on.
It's Hans Zimmer.
Zimmer did. Yeah, I was going to say. I know with No Time to Die, he didn't write the song with Billie Eilish, but when it came to recording it, those two were together for it.
Yes.
So I think it's at least.
He wants to put it in throughout the film, which is good. It's probably as good as we're going to get.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, it's as good as we're going to get, but I can't wait for Casino Royale because the Chris Cornell one, I think the way David Arnold, I think after John Barry is the best composer for James Bond as a series, and it's a shame about. I mean, it's a discussion for Skyfall and Spectre, isn't it? But Sam Mendes wanted to bring in someone else that's not got the history just to be with him, then he'll jump off. And I'm excited for Zimmer, but that is, I think, what is gaping as the years go by is that you get less of the composer being involved. I think it's a really good point. So we're not actually discussed it, but certainly Casino Royale, you get a research. I think Daniel Craig was tied in with it, that the way they wrote the theme was to do with the character of Bond as well. I need to read into it, but that song, there's a reason that song though is stands out above most others, and I think they wrote it from the character perspective, and I think they were all involved with each other. But you don't get that in probably any film now, I'd say. I mean, you don't get many films that have a theme anyway that gets sung, so you just get shit like Eminem singing Venom randomly at the end of that. But no, it's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up, actually.
Yeah, but just to that point, this is one of the things that James Bond has got over any other franchise or whatever. It's got this tradition of a title song, So I do think it's amazing, something they should, make the most of. Which I'm not saying they don't now; they just do it in a different way, and they want to, they want to get like Billie Eilish in, but you can't say to them, Billy, can you work with Thomas Newman or can you work with Hamlet? I don't know. I just don't think it's sort of the other way around. But the idea of a theme song and having a title sequence with those images, Bond has that, and they should never lose those things which make it special and separate from other franchises.
I think you're a bit hamstrung if you do the song separately, so it's a lot harder to then get a good score. You will see with License to Kill, I think you get the best of both, because Michael Kamen's score, I mean, it sounds a lot like Lethal Weapon and Die Hard, but it's so perfect for that film in that period of time. And he had nothing to do with the writing the License to Kill song, which is also, I think, it's a brilliant song. But how much better when you've got John Barry, you can incorporate. Oh, you're laughing because you obviously don't. Anyway.
No, I'm laughing because it's my favourite Bond song. That's why.
Oh, good. Yeah. Good. Yeah, so when you've got John Barry, I think it was a case of the artist would be like, oh, I'd love to work with John Barry and write a song with John Barry. It's like the highlight of your career. They're not going to do that now. They're not. It's the other way around, isn't it? And it's like, we'll get you, Hans Zimmer it's not because they've thought Hans Zimmer's a brilliant composer, which he is, well, let's get him. It's like, well, I think the first guy,
didn't he?
Yeah, they had Dan Roma or somebody who was fired or whatever. He wasn't good enough. So it's like, quick, we'll better get someone who's reliable, give them a lot of money, and then they can do it. And it's not, this is the complaint with the franchise as a whole now. They're not really thought through. At this stage in the 80s, everything's so organised, and every 2 years, everything's done the same way. And it was a lot easier to do. So even though in the last few films you've missed John Barry, he was always the first choice. There was absolutely no question. It was just, I think a lot of it was money, and I think by the time I was reading maybe GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies, it's not again that they've moved on. It's either they couldn't afford him or he said no or something like that, and all the budget had gone elsewhere. So you can argue that was a poor decision for GoldenEye certainly. But with this, yeah, coming back to the song, I think you're absolutely right. I think it is one of the loveliest melodies that John Barry has done. I think On a Majesty's for me is perfect, but it's just too harrowing for me. When I hear it, I'm like, it's too emotional. It's so you can't separate it from the film. So whereas like Moonraker and All Time High, the instrumentals are so beautiful, but there's not that harrowing image that I have in my mind when I listen to them, so I can listen to them a bit more gleefully or whatever. And I think whereas Moonraker the song, I think works a lot more than this does somehow. I think it might be partly because Shirley Bassey's obviously got a cracking voice, but I think it's the production and it just feels a bit too 80s maybe with the saxophone. It perhaps needed a beat perhaps in it, a bit more of that, or like another bridge section maybe to make it a bit more. And like you say, you've just had this incredible pre-title sequence, action packed. And okay, it's synonymous now with "Fill her up, please," and then and when it comes back at the end of the film, it's like, yeah, it isn't like, whoa, this is so Bond, I want to go and ski down a mountain now, is it? It's not. It's never going to be that. But in terms of the score, I think, like you say, John Barry is just the man. I'm looking forward, Chris, to hear your thoughts on his final two. The next two are, I mean, possibly his best. They're absolutely incredible. Because he gives you about 3 or 4 new films on every film, and he very rarely rehashes anything. So on this, you've got the for the bomb and all that. You've got that little bit. You've got the bits in India. You've got some slightly Indian melodies, but he does use the Bond theme. So the Bond theme, when it's used for the tut-tut chase in India, it's just that to me is like, if I think of a Bond theme, I don't think of the original one in Doctor No that was used for a bit. I think of like this one because it's a better arrangement to me. It's much more lush and it's just got those memories of Roger Moore and being Bond, and it's used at the right time. Sorry to go on, but every time the Bond theme should be used, it's not just piece of action music. It's him doing something that only Bond should be doing. So I think it sort of comes in a little bit right at the end of the auction. And it's only for about 10 seconds, but it's like that's Bond being Bond, and that's what we want.
No, absolutely, and I think you hit the nail on the head there, where you talked about the Rita Coolidge song and how it doesn't sort of like stack up to some of the other ones. I think it is the production. I think you've nailed it. It feels really stripped back, and it does have strings in there, but it doesn't feel like the full power of like an orchestra behind her. It feels it's like smaller, more intimate, I guess, which as a song, it's fine, as we mentioned, but with Bond, you need that sort of like grandiose backing behind it, don't you? Because this is a Bond song. This isn't just like any run-of-the-mill song. This is like your opening title song. And yeah, like my favorite Barry ones in Bond are where they utilize the main theme and work it into the score as well. So I know next week, Duran Duran is just... chef's kiss.
Beautiful. Stacey.
I don't know how that song can work into the score. Maybe it does. Maybe it comes in.
You won't believe it, mate.
It's a romantic thing. It works brilliantly.
I'm looking forward to it, definitely. But so another solid score for this one. I guess that takes us on to like favorite scenes from this one. I mean, we've already talked about a few, but there's still some like massive outliers of scenes that we haven't talked about. I'm going to start with a moment for mine. This isn't really a scene. I put the banister slide was awesome.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So it was like a John Woo movie. I was so there. It was incredible. The fact that I had to make a separate note for that moment alone just like says everything.
We tried to recreate that at home as kids, but a bit more dangerous. We didn't have a machine gun to shoot off the end.
Watch out for the bit at the bottom as well, because that's not going to be fun. But it's awesome. It was like the Scarface mansion shootout or something. It was fantastic. But I've got to talk about like the final. If I'm picking one scene, there's obviously like the awesome train scene, which someone might pick as theirs, but the final aeroplane action beat, it's just tremendous. Like I was watching it, and the bit where they have to like jump out of the plane right before it goes off the cliff. It's very rare that I'll watch a Bond film and I get so engrossed into it that I'm making sounds as I'm watching it. So just when they jump out and they're like, it's the cliffhanger thing, I was going like like I was actually reacting to the film, and I never usually do that with films or get like really vocal about it, but it just kind of happened. It was a sound that just kind of slipped out as I was watching. So it absolutely had me. I think it still holds up an action scene. The fact that you can clearly see they've got the stunt guys doing that as well. I mean, God forbid, like clinging onto the side of the plane. We always talk about Tom Cruise doing it. Mission Impossible 5, back then doing this, and you have the bit where he says like to Govinda, like, go and take care of him, and it's the wide shot as he's like climbing on top of the plane. The bit where he takes out Govinda with like the aerial, like snaps it in his face, and you see him free falling. It's just so much, just everything, just the whole. I'd say this is probably like one of my favorite third acts to a Bond film so far. It's just tremendous. Can't say enough positive words about it.
I think the plane sequences by Kutchum are the best thing in the film, and what's amazing is that it's so similar to the opening scene, that we have an incredible plane sequence in the opening credits. It's like, how are you going to top that? Well, let's have not just a bigger plane, but when they're spinning them on it as well, Govinda going out, there are stakes to it, and it's an incredible finale point. I honestly love it. And it's again going back to that, this feels like this is, James Bond should always be the pinnacle of stunts, should be the set pieces, all that kind of stuff. I've always sort of championed that in that sort of like British film industry, that Bond sets the standard.
Yeah.
And, we'll argue in the future about what Mission Impossible's done over the last sort of 5-6 years and slowly starting to take that mantle, but you can't take it away from this film. And the train sequence as well, I absolutely love it. And it's the fact that that's a moving train, and yes, the Roger Moore sound effects. I think a couple of people were injured, didn't they? A couple of stuntsmen with the stuff on the sides, but
fractured leg, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, it's just one of them. I saw a really good Twitter post the other day, and it's like, what's the best train sequences in cinema? And I was like, well, James Bond itself has about bloody 10 at this rate in time. So many different Bond films doing train sequences, but this one's so different to all of them. And the fact it's a circus as well just makes it even cooler. If it was a normal train carriage, you'd be like, okay. But it's like, this is a circus. And it's like, that kind of just adds something to it. And I just had a really fun time. And then also, Roger Moore as him, so just staring through the window at Octopussy as well.
Yeah, another one.
It's just like, you get that shot where it's like from the inside the carriage, it's just his head. That meme of what was that series? Come Fly With Me, when he's looking through the airplane, it's like dog is dead. It's kind of like the original shot, like Roger Moore's just kind of like got his head through the window looking, and they all like going in trying to shoot him. I thought the whole train sequence was absolutely phenomenal.
I mean, I find this really difficult. There's some non-action scenes which are absolutely brilliant in this film. The ones that you've mentioned are brilliant. So to choose something else, it's what I've been talking about. The bomb sequence. We've learned in the previous minutes that there's this bomb going to go off, what the damage it's going to cause, and then what he has to do to disarm it is just incredible. Disarm it. That's the word I was looking for. I just like I say, I love the idea of disarming a bomb that's going on in the middle of a circus. Like, what a cracking idea when you're writing a script. This brilliant, like I say, juxtaposition, and the fact that Octopussy gets involved, but Bond does absolutely everything to stop. I really love it when Bond does everything to stop something like that, rather than just act in self-interest. And I do have problems with the Craig era, but in Casino Royale, when he stops the plane from exploding, that's kind of what I'd prefer to see as like in a third act of a Bond film and everything. So that for me, I'm going to say that's my favorite scene, but could have been several.
And even in that, just the moment of, you see Bond use his wits because his tires get ripped up, so he goes on the train track, and then you get the Bond theme, and then
it's like Back to the Future 3, isn't it? Like,
follow that car, and you're like, like this is nice. But in terms of other scenes, there's like the poignant scene when VJ is found dead and Q's with him, and it's like, no more problems, and no, he was dead. He was dead when I found him, and all he said was that it was Kamal's men. And again, you've got Barry's score going on. That's really good. And before that, though, we've mentioned it a couple of times. The casino scene is the most brilliant Roger Moore scene. You've got him at his best, and I think we've discussed this. Matt mentioned this a few times when he knows that the dice are rigged, so he knows that Kamal's are always going to get a 666. So, oh look, then I'll use player's privilege and use yours. So he takes them, and then he doesn't look. He just rolls a dice. He doesn't even look to see because he knows. I mean, it's that. I'd love to know whether that was intentional. Whether Roger sort of added that, like as a, I'm so in control of this.
Yeah,
that's brilliant. But the one of my favorite scenes in the whole franchise is the auction scene. I just think it's absolute peak Bond. It's peak Roger. How they got fanning the guy with him is just really worried and stressed. What is Bond doing now? And he's almost goading him, like, look, Jim, showing him the egg, and that let's see how badly he wants it, and how it ends with, like, you had no business bidding for that egg, and he goes up to some ridiculous level. So Bond knows, well, why on earth does he need this? So he's like, that's what I intend to find out. And it's, again, he's absolutely focused on the mission. You think he's distracted by the women, having a bit of fun, but no, he's always completely in control. And I think it's a terrific scene.
Yeah, I think this is one of the prime examples of just like how self-assured and like confident Bond is, especially Roger Moore's Bond. And the fact that he just starts bidding just to up the price, just to fuck over Kamal Khan, just to be a bit of a dick, really. I absolutely love that about it. And and it's like when he goes against the grain, when he goes against orders, but he's got like a bigger plan for it. It's like, well, what would you have done if you'd have had the egg? He says like, I would have told them it was a fake and, like got my money back. So he's always got a plan for everything. Which is tremendous. So obviously tied to our favorite scenes, just before we get into our final thoughts on the film, we always sort of want to end with this, which is the Bond one-liner of the week. And I think, George, I mentioned to you that within the opening 40 minutes of this film, there were already so many more one-liners than there were in For Your Eyes Only last week, because last week was a real struggle to get some one-liners, actually. So I'll fire through a few that I've got in this one. So the first one is actually, I think it's the first line that Bond has in the film. It's like, Toro sounds like a load of bull.
Oh, yeah.
Loved it. Thank God for Hard Currency was another good one. But I think my favorite for this one was the exchange with Q in the hot air balloon, where it's just like, I trust you can handle this contraption, Q. It goes by hot air. Oh, then you can. Loved it. So that's probably my favorite. I know it's not a one-liner, it's an exchange, but that probably takes it for me in this one, I think.
I can't even think there's so many. I'm going to be really boring and pick the story one, which was the that's for 009. Only because we've spoken in the past about the moments Chris always mentioned in Spy Love Me when she's goading him, she's about to mention Tracy. And that's when like Roger Moore can snap and get the serious tone. And that's what the 009 moment is. You're expecting an incredible one, and you get that and it's like, you know what? I'm going to be polite and not do a comedy one this time around. But there is potential for future ones. But this is the really sad part, is that because we're on the penultimate Roger Moore episode. I know Dalton's got a couple, but it's like we're going to go from the one every minute to sort of a couple per film, which is a crying shame. But there's a lot of unbelievable Rogers, and I love that when he also meets the general. I forgot the line he says, but he's like, "Oh, it's like, oh, you're a Toro too," or something like that. Like he even tries to carry on like he's not trying to impersonate him. I just thought it's great.
Yeah, well, there's some really good dialogue in this film. You mentioned it before. I really like in the backgammon scene. Spend the money quickly, Mr. Bond. I intend to, Kamal Khan. I really like that, and the music that's going on. There's some funny one-liners, 10 a penny, when he gets to the brilliant Q scene with VJ.
Yeah.
Even with VJ in there, game, set, and match, and all that lot. But I mean, as a very babyish, childish one, the that big rope that goes up and then like collapses. Having trouble keeping it up, Q. Sorry, crude, I know, but dear me, yeah. I mean, that's pretty funny.
There's so many in that scene, aren't there? Just basic, like, there's a hand, very handy. It's so cool, isn't it? And then, cracking image Q. I mean, you couldn't get that made. A lot of this stuff you couldn't do now, and you couldn't do that should keep you in curry for a few weeks.
No.
Dear me. Oh, and Rupiah when he chose the...
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. Oh no, there's just so many, and I think Roger like there's probably more in this film, aren't there, than there are
Mhm.
in both Timothy Dalton's and all the Craigs put together in terms of, really enjoyable one-liners. Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
See, it's smiles all round on this one. I guess we're going to go into like overall opinions now, in case we've gone over 2 hours on this one. If you couldn't really tell,
Sorry again.
we all love this film. No, it's great. It's great. I hope that people watching at home, this is kind of like a nice little retribution from last week. It's just like all is well, balance has been restored. We haven't really been like some of us against this film, some of us for this film. It's completely unanimous on this one. I don't know if it's you're going to be as unanimous on me on this one. This is probably one of my favorites I've watched so far, in all honesty. Just, the fact that every set piece, every character in some way has been memorable. We can talk about it, and I'm still remembering the film now, and, having this conversation today, I think this just cements it that it's probably one of my favorites. In terms of writing, story, yeah, it's not all that. And there are better Bond films out there for its story and sort of like, I guess, like beginning, middle, and end, just as like a complete package. But this is easily one of the most entertaining ones. The stunt work, as I mentioned, the final act is fantastic. Love all of the villains, love the Bond girl. Everything just comes together in this one for me. I think this is easily like one of my favorite Roger Moore ones. I'd say Spy Who Loved Me is still my favorite. Moonraker's just slightly better than this one. This is probably my third favorite one, though, so far. I know I haven't got to A View to a Kill. That's going to be next week, but out of, the 6 that I've watched of his so far, this is probably third. Absolutely loved it.
I wouldn't know where to place it yet. This is a really weird one because obviously I love the film, but I appreciate there are some downfall moments, but I couldn't care less about things that don't work because so much more of it does. And I think it makes it more enjoyable to watch as a viewer, as a fan, that you get all these incredible moments. And I think what more like you get topped off with the set pieces, the big things that make these films what they are, and when you look at the Bond films, they're always trying to outdo the previous one. I'm not going to bring up sort of Fury Zone again, but, how do you outdo the plane sequence from this final act? It's setting the future standard for them to try and come back to try and get it better. How are we going to make something better than that? And I think that's what I love what these films do. They're sort of pushing the limits of certainly us looking back as a retrospective, they're pushing the limits of what they can do at the time. It's only sort of 15, 16 years before when you've got sort of Thunderball with Little Nelly, which we looked at. Sorry, not is it? No, You Only Live Twice. Yeah. And it's that looked incredible, and that was like 67. And look at here we are in 83 with real planes doing that, and it's almost the not coming full circle, but you're still getting the Bond theme put on the top of it where it belongs. Still getting these grandiose moments, and it's able to push it to the limit. So I'm absolutely blessed with this one. And ranking wise, I'm quite scared. I don't know where it's going to go. It could be anywhere. It's one of them where any given day. But what it is, it's a Roger Moore classic, and I think that's what you want from these. Where we are when you hit the 80s, you're going to get the complete spectrum of you're going to go from Moore to Dalton. That's not just a bog standard jump. That's like a complete 180 with the same director. Yeah. Last week I was quite cynical for Fury Zone, but with Glenn at the helm, I did mention that License to Kill feels like a better version of Fury Zone, and we're only a couple of films away from that now, so I'm excited to dig back into that.
I mean, it's one of my favourite films of all time, but that's not necessarily to say it's my favourite Bond film. But it's just so enjoyable from start to finish. Like I say, I think it could be the best film for having the most amount of light and shade, if you know what I mean, of having like serious bits, but then very light-hearted bits. I really think John Glenn deserves great credit for this film as well, because there's so much going on. And yeah, I agree that the story, I don't particularly understand it, but I do think, like I say, I know what needs to happen at certain bits and what needs to not happen, and everything, which obviously helps. The John Glenn run of films, I know you guys weren't as big of fans of For Eyes Only, but his the 5 films in the 80s are, I really love them. I think Octopussy and A View to a Kill are probably my personal favourite Roger ones. But I think this one, is just a bit like Moonraker as well, and maybe Spy Who Loved Me. It's so perfect for Roger Moore that, like, A View to a Kill, I mean, I don't want to prejudge, but like, with a bit of rewriting and whatnot, it wouldn't have been as difficult to put someone else in that, and then you take some of the silly bits out. Whereas this just seems so perfect for Roger, and knowing they were going up against Never Say Never Again, I just think it blows that out of the park. It's tremendous. I just can't say enough positive things about it.
Obsessed with this film, yeah. It's a childhood favorite. I've just remembered another line as well. When he first meets VJ, and he says, "I've joined his tennis club, Kamal Khan's tennis club." In other words, to try and get a bit of information. Like, what have you learned? Like, well, my backhand's improved. Yeah, in terms of the film, the run from again, I know Chris, you haven't seen them all yet, but the run from this to License to Kill and even GoldenEye is just can't beat it. And they each feel like their own films. They feel a little bit linked in some way, but not in other. I mean, like Moonraker to For Your Eyes Only, it just feels like a completely different Bond, even, doesn't it? And then from that to from For Your Eyes Only to this, it's a different Bond again. Even A View to a Kill, it's maybe a little bit more, but it's just they're like their own complete adventures. And because you get India, I think that's what maybe sets it apart a bit. It looks brilliant. The score's brilliant. Roger Moore's, I think it's probably his best performance. Okay, it might not have the Zorin or the Drax, in terms of iconography, and it's got possibly the best Bond girl of his reign. I think it's. I mean, we don't like to rank films too much because we love them all, and it doesn't mean we don't like others. But I think this is in my top. I have like the same top four. Those four that are my favourite Bond films, and so it could be anywhere in that. I just love it, and I've watched it so many times. I could happily watch it now. I love it. I love watching it with people as well because everyone's just laughing most of the way through.
Like entertainment, that's what you want, right? Especially from Roger Moore, like he absolutely brings it in spades. One other moment I'm going to chuck out there real quick is when he gets off the train and he can't get a lift and he just starts jogging down the road. I had to mention that because this is going to be the only time that we get to do it. That got a good laugh out of me as well. But
and he steals the car. He steals that poor woman's car as well.
Oh yeah. German lady, yeah. I was kind of nervous going into this one just based on all the negative reviews that you see out of there, and I really didn't know what to make of this one. Like coldly going into it, but we're pre-recording this one, so we're recording this on Saturday. Obviously, this is going to be up on the Tuesday if you're watching it now. I'm scared of the comments because I know they know that we didn't like last week's as much. And if I like this one, but not For Your Eyes Only, I don't know how they're just going to write me off completely, I think, after this one. I don't care. I love this film and I'm sticking with it. So that'll do it for our review on Octopussy. So be sure to let us know your thoughts. And, I'm sure a bunch of you have at this point as well, commenting along. One of us will, it sounds weird recording this in hindsight. We'll be in the live chat anyway, and we'll be talking along with you. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And we are on to Moore's final film next week, which is going to be sad. It's going to be a sad farewell to Moore. A View to a Kill. That's the one. As soon as we hit the credits on this one as well, and it was like Bond will return in A View to a Kill. I was like, yes, he will, and I can't wait to hear that Duran Duran song.
Duran Duran, yeah. It just whenever you think of like View to a Kill, it should have its own entrance music. Like instantly, the theme starts playing in your head as soon as Saw mentions the film. It's just perfect. It's a prelude for next week. Perfect.
Chris, did you notice, by the way, it said James Bond will return in from A View to a Kill? Did you notice?
No, I missed that. I know that. I think like growing up, the name has kind of been flip flopped. Like you don't know if it's from A View to a Kill or A View to a Kill or A View to a Kill. Yeah. So the credits lying to us once again. Like Bond will return in For Your Eyes Only. No, he won't. But I just want to say a big thank you to you guys jumping back on as well. As I mentioned, by popular demand, it's always great to have you on and talk about Bond with you guys. And just before we round off, if you guys want to talk about where people can find you and maybe what you've got coming up on Really 007.
Yeah, well, you guys actually record your episodes and release them fairly quickly, whereas we still haven't released. I think we've got a Casino Royale review coming up. We recorded it Christmas or something like that. So we're a bit out of date, but we've got at the moment a Best Allies episode, which is a 3-parter because again we do go on and we that's every film basically. So that's a good one to listen to for people who don't really haven't heard before. The reviews are obviously pretty long. We'll have Casino Royale out soon. We're going to be doing some stuff on stunts, and we've got a very special interview coming up in May. Well, it depends. Again, we don't know we take ages releasing them, but we've got a really good one coming up. Hopefully at the end of summer, something like that.
Nice. And well, it's always a pleasure to have you on as well. I'm sure we've got you scheduled for another one later down the line. It's just great talking about Bond with you. George, what else have we got coming up? Have we got anything else coming up?
Yeah, we do. So by the day this goes up, our review for Ted Lasso Season 2 would have gone up yesterday for you football fans at home. Incredible series of watching. At the time of recording, we don't know if football's come home yet, so we're not going to say anything. Just in case there's a bit of embarrassment. But what there is coming up for sure is a Loki finale spoiler discussion. That's going to be tomorrow at 8 p.m. by the time this goes up. And we're going to have Space Jam 2 this weekend as well. And looking at the past, but also the future of where we are, to make things more confusing, there's a Space Jam 1 watch-along on the channel from Saturday night that Chris and Tate were on. So, again, that was pre-recorded. This is very weird. It's very trippy doing sort of these things. So, we're going to be around. But as I said, the James Bond stuff is coming every week. And I don't mind dropping another teaser with Spec, but last time there is more Bond stuff planned after No Time to Die will be out. So, if you are with us for the Bond stuff, if you are new, James Bond won't be going away anywhere, but like the modern films, we also can't tell you right away what the next video is going to be by the time we finish the Craig era, because obviously we don't know the schedule after that point. But stick around with us. We love the comments and the support for these. The Bond conversation has been incredible, and who knows, maybe there'll be a big conversation. Maybe we'll reach endgame levels of 10 people on for Quantum of Solace. Who knows? I'm joking. But that being said, I want to thank everybody for watching at home. And we'll be sure to see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.
Take care.